Kenmore City Council will come to order. First item on the agenda is a study session. Update on the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency order of approval of the notice of construction number 11861 for the Cadman asphalt plant in Kenmore, presented by City Manager Rob Cardolenzi, Development Services Director Samantha Loyuk, Code Enforcement Officer Bridget Baker, and Dennis McLaren from Cascadia Law Group.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for scheduling this study session on the notice of construction permit for the Kenmore asphalt plant. And tonight we have Dennis McLaren, who is with Cascadia Law Group, and he's been assisting us with this process for the last year or two. And so if it's all right, I'd like to turn this over to Dennis McLaren, and he can provide more background and more information on what's in the final permit.
Mr. McLaren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Rob, and good evening, members of the City Council. I am going to give a little short history, then talk a little bit about what's in the permit and talk a little bit about the response to the comments from the city of Kenmore and some of its citizens, and how the agency also responded to the Cadman comments, and then talk a little bit about process steps going forward. So with that, why don't I just start with a little bit of the history. If you will recall, back in 2019, citizens of Kenmore and the city of Kenmore lodged odor complaints with the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. And when the Clean Air Agency followed up with inspections of the facility, they determined that there had been equipment modifications at the facility that had been made without proper permitting. Those included modifications to the bag house, which is one of the key emission controls for the facility, modifications to the burner for the facility, modifications to condensers that were emission control devices for the asphalt storage tanks on the site. And there had been a replacement drum dryer at the facility at some point in time as well. And what's important about that is that, well, several things. One is that it was citizens of Kenmore and the city itself that brought this to the attention of the Clean Air Agency. And what's particularly important is that once there were violations at the facility established, it triggered permitting requirements, and it brought the plant out of its former grandfathered status and meant that the plant had to go through a review by the agency of the state's air toxics regulations, had to do air modeling to determine whether the emissions from the plant created health-based air quality standard issues, and also allowed the agency to review the equipment at the facility, the particular pieces of equipment that had been modified for what's called best available control technology, meaning that they had to be reviewed to determine whether they were putting best available control technologies in place. And that meant that there was a review of other similar permits for similar facilities with respect to the types of equipment and the types of emission controls that could and should be required. And also, as part of that, removing the facility from grandfathered status, it meant that the facility has had to meet and has to meet going forward the standards under federal law for asphalt production plants, as well as the permitting requirements that are established under the permit by the Clean Air Agency. And so really important that folks in the community raised complaints to the agency, held their feet to the fire. The agency then, although it took 3 years, did go through a very rigorous review of the facility in terms of air modeling for toxics to determine whether there are any health hazards created, air modeling for ambient air quality standards, and then set limits on the emissions from the facility, and recording and record keeping and monitoring requirements for the facility going forward. So future enforcement will be made easier as a result of all these things that are in this permit. So let's go over a few of the things that are in the permit itself. One of the key things that people were concerned about was potential use of cutback asphalt at the facility. Cutback asphalt is an asphalt product that has higher VOC emissions, is a bit more toxic or can be more toxic than warm mix asphalt products. Cadman has contended that it has not used cutback asphalt at the facility and that it did not intend to use cutback asphalt in the future, but this permit now indicates that cutback asphalt use at the facility is prohibited. It sets a 7% petroleum distillate limit on the products that can be stored in the tanks and used in the tanks and used in the production of asphalt there. And it sets record-keeping requirements that require Cadman to keep records of what products are delivered to the tanks. They can be then inspected by the agency going forward to make sure that there are no violations of that cutback asphalt prohibition. And it now sets that if Cadman were to ever want to use cutback asphalt in the future, which it has said it does not, it would have to go back and get a new permit with different limits for that. So again, a pretty strong prohibition in the permit against use of cutback asphalt. Bag house, the facility has what's called a bag house, and that is an emission control device. And the permit sets operating parameters for the bag house that require that it be operated properly under the manufacturer's specifications, and that records be kept of that on a daily basis, and that those be available for inspection by the agency to make sure that the bag house has been continuously operated in a proper way that reduces emissions from the facility. There are a number of source testing requirements in the permit that was of concern to the city and also to community residents, that there be emissions tests of the facility. The first requirement is that within 90 days after issuance of the permit, that there be a source test to make sure that all the permit limits that are established under the new permit actually are met by the facility. And then it also requires that there be source testing at the stack every 3 years going forward. And that is a stronger requirement than is normally required by the Clean Air Agency. Typically, they would require source testing every 5 years, but here they're requesting it every 3 years. Cadman objected to that. Citizens actually asked that it be more stringent than every 3 years, but the agency defended its use of a 3-year testing time frame, saying it's more stringent than they normally require, and that it will be done pursuant to a test plan that needs to be prepared in advance and reviewed by the agency, so that it'll be done under the parameters that those tests are required to be done. There's extensive facility monitoring and odor response conditions that are set. As all of you know, the key issue that folks have been concerned about, besides air toxics or VOC emissions and cutback asphalt, has been the odor issue with the facility. And the permit contains extensive odor monitoring requirements. There is a condition 26 that's a triggering condition in the new permit, and basically it says that if either the city inspector or the Clean Air Agency inspector detect odors above level 2 on a scale that a trained odor inspector is trained to recognize, then it triggers immediate implementation of an odor response program that requires an investigation of the odor incident, corrective action to take odors down to level 1 or lower as soon as possible, but within 24 hours after receipt of the complaint. And it requires a report of the investigation that must be filed with the agency, the Clean Air Agency, and also what corrective actions were taken. There's also an additional condition 28 that requires Cadman to monitor for detectable odors attributable to emissions from the equipment that was modified, the drum dryer, the bag house, or the storage tanks, once each calendar week during dryer operations. And as council members may recall, there was a lot of concern about whether complaints could be lodged for odors from public spaces like the Burke-Gilman Trail or the library parking lot. And the permit actually identifies the street boundaries within which this regular monitoring on a weekly basis by CADMIN would be required if this facility is continued to be operated. And it again says that if there is detection of an odor through these odor monitoring programs, that there has to be immediate corrective action. There's also a new complaint response program that's established under the permit under condition 29, and it requires CADMIN to establish a complaint response program as part of its operation and maintenance plan that's filed with the agency. And the program has to include a complaint phone line, criteria and methods for establishing whether CADMIN is the source of emissions related to the complaint that's filed, a format for communicating results of the investigation and advising complainants of CADMIN's corrective actions. And complaints have to be recorded and investigated as soon as possible, but no more than 1 working day after receipt. And CADMIN must correct the problems identified by these complaint investigations within 24 hours of identification or cease operation of the equipment until the problem is resolved. And then there's also a requirement that there be records kept for all the complaints and responses. And there are pretty extensive record keeping requirements throughout the permit. And again, the importance of that is that it allows the agency to review those records. And if the records are not kept, it is a violation of the permit. And if the records show that the equipment was operated improperly, or then there's been exceedances of any of the limits in the permit, then there's an ability to take enforcement action there as well. One of the other things that is included in the permit is a production limit, and the production limit is 200,000 tons and they're annually, and there is record keeping required to demonstrate how much production there has been on a 12-month rolling basis, monthly reports that demonstrate that they've stayed within that 200,000 ton annual production limit. And that is another important modification to the permit that was made in response to comments from the city and in response to citizens after the draft permit was issued. It wasn't clear in the draft permit that testing that would be done at the stack in the facility was based on maximum production levels. So the agency did put a stronger condition in place that required that there be testing done at maximum production that had been established over the prior 12-month period. So strong permit and lots of conditions in there, lots of detail in it, lots of record keeping and monitoring and stack testing and so on. So what the city of Kenmore ask for in the draft permit, and how did agency respond? On odor impacts, the city requested that the odor impact conditions be retained and improved. And this was because CADMIN was asking that the odor requirements of the permit be removed because they felt they were unlawful and excessive. The agency actually kept them and strengthened them in response to the comments. While the city asked that some of the citizens' requests for expansion of the monitoring areas in one of the permit conditions be extended, the agency said that they were going to keep the areas that had been identified in the permit, which included the Burke-Gilman Trail and the city library parking lot. Facility monitoring and odor response. There was, I think, again, concern from citizens about whether this was adequate, but these conditions are quite strong, quite extensive, were strengthened in the final permit from what had been there in the draft. And I think that the city also asked that the city's inspector be recognized as a duly authorized representative for fielding and investigating odor complaints, and that was confirmed by the agency. And as the council knows, the agreement between the agency and the city has been renewed for that authorized representative status for the city's field inspector. There were several conflicting commenters on the point of immediacy of response to odor complaints, and there were differing opinions on that, but the agency essentially stayed with its 24-hour response and immediate response under certain portions of the odor conditions. And the city also asked that trucks that were leaving the facility loaded with asphalt be covered, and the agency said that was not something that they were going to add to the permit, because Cadman had already indicated that trucks were going to be covered, and that was how the plant was going to be operated going into the future. So emissions testing, the city did make some comments about the stack testing, that there be a continued 36-month time frame on the inspections, and the agency did keep that, even though Cadman was asking that it be every 5 years. Some of the citizens asked that it be more frequent than 3 years, but the agency kept it at 36 months. And the cutback asphalt restrictions are strong in the permit, and that was one of the concerns from the city in its comments, that those be clarified and responded to, and the agency did respond in its comment response. The city also asked that a spreadsheet with health impacts in the community be evaluated by the Clean Air Agency, and they did respond to that in detail in their comments. And essentially what they said is that by going through the state's air toxics regulations and modeling for air toxics exposure, that those standards under the state's acceptable source impact levels are protective of public health. In fact, they found that none of the air toxics at the facility exceeded even a 40th, that's 1/40th of the limits that are set under the state's air toxics regulations. So all were within either the screening levels or below the screening levels, or within 1/40th of the limits established by the state. Also, the Clean Air Agency responded that the ambient air quality standards that were modeled for are based on extensive public health research done by EPA, and they're intended to be fully protective of public health as well. So what did Cadman ask for in their comments on the draft permit? Well, Cadman asked that the odor conditions be removed from the draft permit. And again, in a very lengthy response, in the response to comments from the Clean Air Agency, they both kept the odor condition requirements and strengthened them going forward in the permit. And as you're quite aware, there were many citizen comments on the permit. They were pretty wide ranging, everything from whether the State Environmental Policy Act review had been adequate, whether there should be more frequent testing, whether there should be a cancer risk or health assessment in the neighborhood. And the agency responded to each one of those, but did not change any of the permit conditions associated with those. They strengthened the odor response. They strengthened the testing within permit limits and production limits, but a number of the comments they in their detailed response said were not going to be modified in the final permit. So on to what comes next in the process. The agency permit was issued, and the 30-day comment, the 30-day appeal period to the Pollution Control Hearings Board was triggered by that. The folks at Cadman have a decision to make about whether they will appeal the permit to the Pollution Control Hearings Board or not. We don't know, whether they will or not. And their objections to the permit that they lodged were fairly strong about their concerns about the odor response programs that were required. But the agency defended those quite strongly in its response to their comments, and the citizen comments and the city's comments all bolster the need for those odor monitoring and odor response requirements in the permit. So I think, with that, I'll respond to questions. And Rob, if there's anything that you wanted to add, please, feel free to add it at this point as well.
Questions? Councilor Marshall.
Thank you. Would the BACT technology required under the permit be the equivalent, or would it be less than that required by, say, a brand new facility built today? And then would we have any grounds to ask for that or not, based on what?
So, that's a great question. And if this was a brand new facility today, there are some other burner technologies and equipment technologies that could reduce emissions even further. But the Air Agency, in its best available control technology review, has to take into account that the facility is an existing facility, and then the best available control technology requirements have some economic reasonableness requirements associated with them. So what they were doing was looking at the equipment that had been modified, is in place, and looking at what comparable requirements for that type of equipment had been either by the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency or other air agencies around the country. And they did an extensive back review in their worksheet that accompanies the permit that council members have been given a copy of. But what they did is they looked at facilities in California, other permits that had been issued in Washington State by both the Clean Air Agency and other air agencies, and came up with what is best available control technology for existing asphalt plants. And so I think the key thing here is that their review of this equipment and the emissions from the processes at this plant were well below the health-based air quality standards. The modeling showed they were well below the health-based air quality standards, and also well below the air toxic standards. So the agency grounded its decision both in what they felt they could require as best available control technology, and also that they felt assured that public health was protected by that best available control technology.
Was there, I think last time, if I remember correctly, there was something like 3/4 of a ton of VOCs the cabinet admitted was going out annually. I think that's what that was. If you could reference that if you remember it. And then would these new permitting requirements, how much would that take that down?
So, I think that these new permitting requirements will not take down the VOCs in and of themselves, but they set limits beyond which the operations of the facility cannot either exceed production levels that would create emissions beyond levels that are consistent with best available control technology and public health protections, and that the testing be done in a way that showed that the operation of the equipment was going to be within those health-based limits. So in and of itself, the controls that are on the facility are the controls that are required under this permit, but the operating parameters, the production limits, the product specification limitations in the permit ensure that the emissions from the facility and the existing equipment that's there will not exceed either air toxics requirements or ambient air quality limits beyond the fence line of the facility. So again, what they're doing is looking at whether the control technologies and the operating parameters for the plant are going to be protective of public health.
Councilmember Shebnick.
Yeah, thank you. I was pleased at the way they distinguished between the public health issues and set clear limits on the air toxics and the ambient air quality, separate from a pretty strong set of clauses related to odor. Because I mean, we know that, you know, odor per se, even if there's not air toxics in it, can, you know, give people headaches and, you know, be pretty challenging on a kind of regular basis if you're exposed to it. So I was pleased about that. Can you remind, I mean, I think I know the answer, but I think it'd be helpful to kind of hear it in this room again. The issue of who kind of controls decisions around whether a plant like this, an asphalt plant, can operate during otherwise unhealthy air days. So like days where we have a lot of smoke, for example. I know we asked the governor's office about a year ago, got shut down on that, but can you kind of remind the group who has the authority to make those decisions?
Sure. You know, that was a comment that was made on the draft permit. Shouldn't the facility be required to cease operations during these air quality periods where there's high levels of wildfire smoke in the air? And the analogy was made to prohibiting, wood stove burning or fireplace burning during those periods. The response from the agency, and I have, researched this as well, is that the governor is vested with the authority to call air quality emergencies and is the only one that can say that there is a sufficient air quality emergency to require facilities to shut down their operations. And again, the city raised that issue to the governor. I think this issue will continue to be one that merits more discussion in the public policy arena because we're having more of these wildfire smoke periods in the summertime. So it is vested with the governor. The statute, the Washington Clean Air Act, has that authority for emergency orders, but it's not vested in the regional clean air agency or even in the Department of Ecology.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. I also really appreciate the public health explanations for the impacts. So I have questions in regards to within the ambient air of the facility. Ambient air within the facility borders does carry with winds and air. And so we did see that in the calculation of some of the mapping that was provided to us. I'd be interested maybe in the future to see some epidemiology data come back on that. And just because when you do look at the CDC website and the smart cities data as it relates to the combination of CDC and Briefus, you do see higher incidence of asthma, COPD, and certain types of cancers. So I'd be interested to see if there are any connections. And I think it's nice to say that the ambient air quality stays within the borders of the business, but that's highly unlikely. So how do we test beyond the borders? That's one of my questions, and I have two more.
Sure. Well, the air quality modeling that was done to ensure that outside the borders of the facility, the emissions that are added from the facility do not violate any public health-based air quality standards, whether it's air toxic standards or ambient air quality standards. And so, again, really important that this permit review was triggered by the complaints from the citizens in the city. It really did generate that review of whether the emissions from the plant would create issues within the community that would be problematic from a public health standpoint. That doesn't mean that all odors are addressed, and it doesn't mean that there might not be clusters in the community, but diesel exhaust, wood smoke from fireplaces and outdoor burning, indoor burning, those are things that drive a lot of the air toxics risk in our communities in the Puget Sound region, and are confounding factors in terms of looking at health impacts outside of industrial facilities. So what they did in the permit was a very significant review of what the plant would produce and whether the plant's emissions would create conditions in the community that would be violative of public health air quality standards.
I appreciate that. You also did indicate that the company is going to have covered loads, or at least suggests that they will. I know when you drive by, you can see signage suggesting or requesting that, but there's nothing that is stipulated saying it's required that I am aware of. It would be nice to ensure that we address that issue.
Yeah, again, the way the agency addressed that in the comments, the response to comments was to say that that is something that the facility operators had committed to, and that they had identified it as a best management practice. If they don't do that, and there are odors generated by that, then I would certainly, have the city field inspector or community members make complaints about that practice. They've committed to covering the loads. The agency believes they will cover the loads, but if they don't and it generates odors, then that is still subject to the odor regulations and complaint response requirements.
I appreciate that. Last question is about the air quality in combination with unhealthy and dangerously unhealthy air, as we've had in recent months. It's not just smoky air, it's particulate matter, bioparticulate matter, the combinations. So if we're not able to have wood burning and fireplaces occur within our borders or within the state, I'm surprised that the facility could operate the way it does in dangerous air quality conditions. And I realize it's up to the governors, and it's the governor's call to make any changes or emergency order in our state. But it is an issue. It's not just the smoke, it's the combination of smoke and particulate.
So just to dig a little deeper on that issue, wood smoke, the result of wildfires, and similarly indoor burning in wood stoves and fireplaces creates polyaromatic hydrocarbons, fine particles, benzene, other air toxics that are harmful to public health and create the potential for triggering asthma attacks and even cardiovascular problems like heart attacks. So exposure to smoke and fine particulates and the chemical constituents of those is a public health issue that merits more attention and more discussion. And in the past, when we haven't had these summer wildfire events as a result of climate change, it has not been a summertime occurrence, and in the wintertime, it typically has been largely driven by wood burning for home heating. And so this is a developing issue. It's only been the last 2 or 3 years that this has started to occur, but yes, it's something that merits more discussion, more attention, and wood smoke from wildfires does create a public health hazard.
Well, thank you. And thank you again for all your hard work on this. I really appreciate it. The depth of the data and recommendations. I also really appreciate our Representative Jerry Paulette, who's worked so hard on these issues at the state level and for the city of Kenmore and our community. And I also appreciate our community advocates who have, been steadfast on this issue, and it continues to be an issue. So thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor.
I have a follow-on question related to the very hazardous air quality issues and emissions. It's clear that, especially given your responses, that we can't, or Puget Sound Clean Air Agency can't write that into this permit, and that the power is currently vested in the governor. For our community and for us at large, what can the people do if that sort of requirement? What are the steps that our community can take to potentially make that improvement? I'm sure that Kenmore isn't the only community that is impacted by potentially hazardous emissions during these times, but are there steps that the people can take to work towards this, towards regulating potentially toxic emissions during these smoke seasons, during these very hazardous air quality days?
Well, certainly, you mentioned Representative Paulette, but talking to state elected representatives about whether there is more authority that should be created around this, what the appropriate responses might be with respect to facilities. There is some increased monitoring that's going on under the Climate Commitment Act that is primarily focused on disproportionately impacted communities, but I suspect that some of that work by the Department of Ecology around impacts on communities will have to take into account these air quality episodes that are happening with more frequency during the summertime. So keeping it an issue for further public policy choices and discussion is I think an important issue, because it is if you have a child with asthma, wildfire smoke is very significant. Your child may not be able to go outdoors. Your child may end up in the hospital with an asthma attack and so on. And that is, largely, again, driven by the very high levels of particulates and other chemicals in wood smoke. And I think part of the issue here is whether industrial or manufacturing facilities, whether their contribution is large enough for them also to be part of some kind of emergency response or emergency alert. But more discussion with elected representatives and the governor's office, I think, is certainly appropriate and merited.
Thank you. I do have one more question, just to follow up. Would a citizens initiative, potentially a statewide citizens initiative, be an approach that could go towards this?
It could. Again, in Washington State, there are initiative powers vested with the citizens, and it requires the number of petition signatures that trigger getting it on the ballot and so on. But that is another pathway.
Yeah, I think it's important that the people understand the powers that are vested in them to make changes in these critical times. I really want to thank you for the deep work that you've done on this. We've made great progress over the past year and a half, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, next we have a special public comment about this part of the agenda. We have 18 minutes until 7 o'clock. Clerk, how many folks do we have signed up to speak?
2 on site, and at the moment 2 virtual.
Okay, great. We'll
3.
give everybody 3 minutes then. So yeah, the amount of time allotted per speaker will be 3 minutes. The same public comment rules apply where the council does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the council is to listen. We'll hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you're online, use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. Clerk, would you call the first person?
Yes, we're going to have Patrick O'Brien followed by Elizabeth Mooney.
Good evening, City Council. You alone are empowered to do something in Kenmore because it's pretty clear that the governor of this state and the hierarchy at Puget Sound Clean Air are in a line and cahoots with the Asphalt Association. When we worked with Jerry Paulette and gave testimony at Olympia, the agency came to the aid of the asphalt plant and said, oh, they're no different than anybody else. This is not in the public service. What you can do and what our good friend here, Mr. McLaren, is not telling you is that you can take legal action, and it's called a nuisance. It's a tort. You can take it to court right away. If you have people that say that is a nuisance, a tort court can rule that is a nuisance, and we're going to issue a cease and desist order. That's one thing that your $100,000 consultant didn't tell you, all the other ways you could go to end that. I was told a long time ago, if they ever went and shut down their fake grandfathered clause, that you could change the zoning on that, and they'd have to go through a whole new iteration of seeing if what they want to do out there is in line with the community business zoning that rightfully is. How many times have we been asked to spend millions of dollars to increase that waterfront? It's how good it looks and the future of Kenmore, to only have a bad actor, burn and be in possession of our health and not caring at all. Burn ban be damned. They went ahead and did it. And you guys need to take legal action and stop this bull-loney around that I hear this guy saying. When somebody says, oh, we've got modeling. Modeling was already dismissed by David, PhD David. He says, these guys are not operating in the real world. What at the very least, we should have been talking about stack testing 24/7. And if they do anything, you put a 10 over it and you make them breathe that before they ever let it go outside of that area. Because I'm telling you, it's awful. It's a health absolute violation, and they don't care. And you have to take the bull by the horns and get some legal help that'll help you more than this Cascade Law Group. He's just an excuse maker, and I am appalled that we wasted $100,000 on him. His advice is not good, and you absolutely, for your voters, need to act on this in court right now. No more mamby-pamby baloney. Thank you.
Hi, council and staff and citizens. Elizabeth Mooney. I'm here as an individual, but I also want to say that thank you for the nonprofit for which I am president of People for Environmentally Responsible Kenmore, because that is part of the reason that in 2017, we had the opportunity to work with the city and have the STEM kids from Tacoma come up, thanks to Dr. Robin Evans Agnew working with us, and a graduate student from UW. And we basically did citizen science and discovered there was a pretty nasty effect of that emissions. That was the same year that the plant at the time owned, I think, or at least by CEMEX, was in violation, ironically. But anyway, with 2 minutes left, I want to say that personally, I hope the order does take effect. That's partly because I trust Representative Jerry Paulette, who has been working with us tirelessly. I wish that there was a symptom survey that had been conducted. We provided that but we didn't walk it. So I think that the city should have signage, and I hope that Dennis McLaren could help the city put up signage at the Burt Gilman Trail to provide a hotline that comes directly to the city, because this permit does allow enforcement of the odor violations. And if the city could have those signs down at the Burt Gilman and at our town, that would be really helpful so that Bridget Baker can get in there and stop it. I do want to thank the city and the staff for having these meetings the last week. Thank you, Rob Carlinzi, for conducting that and participating. And thank you for hiring Dennis McLaren. I have to say, in support of Patrick O'Brien, who just spoke, he breathes that nasty, nasty diesel emissions that came from that plant during the beginning of COVID. When I would try to run from Northwest Kenmore down to be near my town, I would run back because I was being poisoned by what was coming out of that plant. And the owner, director, Dr. Benedict Zing, whatever his name was, he wouldn't even say that he would live next to this Kenmore plant. Kate Donaldson, who also tastes the asphalt on her sheets, she asked me to please read this too, so I'm going to take up this time. If the city of Kenmore knowingly does not, oh no, this is, well, okay. If the city of Kenmore knowingly does not inform the citizens of potential health risks from emissions emitted from Cadman asphalt plant, they will be violating not only the people's trust, but risking the health of its citizens, especially the elderly, health compromised, low income. I don't think you should put low income down by the Burt Gilman, where a tall building will be hit with the Plymouth project by the emissions until that is tested. So you know exactly what's coming out of that plant, because it's an old plant. This is a retroactive plant. And that's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Mayor, I have no more on-site speakers. Can I move to virtual?
Yes.
If you are attending virtually and would like to give public comment at this time, please raise your hand. I do have 4 individuals now raised, and we're going to take them in this order. Stacy Valenzuela, followed by Janet Hayes, David Morton, and Nancy Hansen. Stacy, go ahead.
Good evening, Stacy Valenzuela. Can you hear me?
You can go ahead.
Thank you. Cadman, Cal Portland, Trinity plants. Comments to PSCAA and our residents to dispute the stipulation and updated standards on the NOC permit 11861 echo what they have been saying for years and lead you to believe it's just steam. Let's apply some common sense. If the asphalt emissions were up to current standard measurements of particulate matter and low petroleum, and if Cadman Lehigh plant was not using our storage cutback asphalt binder, why would they be requesting dismissal of these stipulations? If they were regulating process without dark opacity, high PM levels and dioxins, residents would not be filing over 25,000 complaints of sulfur stench, grit in their mouth and bedding, headaches, and problems breathing since 2010. Why would they be requesting dismissal of these stipulations? Kenmore would not have a 9 out of 10 for cancers, an 8 or 9 out of 10 for particulate matter. Kenmore would not be higher than the state and county for COPD and double for lung disease. Asthma rates would not be so high from 2010 to 2019. Over the last 12 years, what other entities were aware of these unhealthy conditions in Kenmore? Residents, nurses, and doctors in the area would not be sounding alarms and writing letters if they too did not see the disparity. Residents requested testing every 18 months due to the past questionable activity and known health issues. We requested odor nose testing in the 5 main neighborhoods where neighbors have high rates of cancer. We requested adoption of the EPA recommended of actual manual testing rather than using AP42 formula that they found due to the variables in material calculations allow PM, dioxin, air pollution in over half the sources, and this found asphalt plants in non-compliance. This also listed 6 dioxins possible and proved that these emissions are not just steam. These PM and dioxin for years compromised the health of our residents, along with the air, water, and land in Kenmore. Blaming diesel exhaust is just a convenient agenda for EV vehicles. We also asked that the stationary plants be included in the burn ban for unhealthy air days. A local doctor also recommends the adding of a malfunction emission warning for our residents. Again, it's not just steam. So let's apply common sense. We work so hard to get to this point. We need the city to back us up. We need the state to back us up. And we need these protections for the unhealthiness of this plant. Thank you.
Janet Hayes, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Janet Hayes. I'm a resident of Kenmore since 1998. The asphalt plant was not built in Kenmore. All of the obsolete equipment was bought and brought from an asphalt plant that had been in Everett, Metro Asphalt, in case anyone wonders. The emissions are held at we trust you. We're supposed to be able to trust you. It's been hard to trust you. And now we're facing a big decision. The emissions are held at lung level to our surrounding sidewalks, businesses, residents, multifamily developments, commuters, catching and getting the bus that's going to be expanded. The stack is 28 feet high, was 28 feet high. It is now 26 feet high, I read in one document, and it is down on 175th. It begins. It's released at lung level to our sidewalks. That's what's bad. And the residents that live here. Why? Because Kenmore Air was here first. That's why it's got a short stack. Kenmore Air was here before the asphalt company. The reason, and I was told this by the Department of Planning when Angelo was there, was because the flight plan of Kenmore Air wouldn't allow it. They're entitled to a certain regulation. And so is the cement plant. That's a problem. When asked what was happening in March this year, the new stack was being built and put in, changed finally, but it's just as bad. The public trust is gone, and that's so sad. Brian Hampson was asked when we saw that they were putting in the new stack that the plant was in compliance, no permit necessary. I'd like some things explained before I am in total agreement, and I'm hoping just to educate the public and to have something good there.
Your time is up.
I'm tired of the neighbors.
Your time is up. David Morton, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good evening, council members. I'm David Morton. I live near Redmond. At the asphalt plant in Kenmore, condensers control VOC emissions from the two asphalt cement storage tanks. In 2017, the condenser on the smaller tank was moved to the larger tank, and a new condenser was installed on the smaller tank. This replacement of a pollution control device required permitting review. The contents of the tanks also came under review. When Cadman initially applied for NOC number 11861 in June 2019, Christy McDonough, environmental manager of the Cadman Kenmore facility, wrote, "Because the condensers are new emission controls, they require a notice of construction. But when PSCAA determined that the contents of the asphalt cement storage tanks also come under review because the condensers require a notice of construction, Cadman claimed that the condensers should not be part of the review. PSCAA stated that this contradicts Cadman's own application materials. PSCAA also determined that any future use of cutback asphalt at the plant would constitute a change in the method of operation that the plant should be using, and would require a new NOC order of approval from PSCAA. If Cadman has no intention of using cutback asphalt at this plant, then there's no harm to Cadman in prohibiting the storage of cutback asphalt in the tanks. Why did Cadman object to prohibiting the storage of cutback asphalt in the tanks? Does this order put an end to a method of operation that's been used unofficially at the asphalt facility for 50 years? PSCAA did not attempt to determine the plant's actual method of operation for the last half century. Order of approval number 11861 only addresses the plant's method of operation beginning on October 26, 2022. Even though PSCAA's own inspection report from September 11th, 2017 shows that Cadman was storing and regularly using cutback asphalt at the Kenmore plant, PSCAA has stated that the Cadman Kenmore facility does not use cutback asphalt. PSCAA has determined that the plant is not presently permitted to use cutback asphalt, but did not attempt to disprove allegations of the plant's prior use of cutback asphalt. Prohibiting the storage of cutback asphalt and not permitting its use will significantly reduce VOC emissions from the plant. Please don't appeal the order. Thank you.
Nancy Hansen, go ahead.
There, am I there?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, Nancy Hansen from Kenmore. I think we need to be looking at the long-term picture of cement in general. Cement is responsible for between like 4 and 8% of the world carbon emissions totally. And if cement were ranked as a country, it would be third highest emitter of carbon behind the US and China. And I think now, we're all going through change. Climate conditions weren't there when Cadman started. And now is a good time to level with Cadman, I think. I don't know if aren't they owned by a larger company? I was reading something else, but anyway. And I think the harder it will be to do our job as far as goals that we have set as climate goals and bringing back our salmon and orca, the harder it will be the longer this goes on. And the gas plant in Seattle went for 20 years and toxins are still in the soil and not cleaned up. So this is a lot longer than that. And the longer we wait, the worse it's going to get. I see that Lake Sammamish is working on hatcheries for kokanee, and other people along the river and are doing a lot of things to help improve the conditions. And I think we need to be doing a better job here in Kenmore for both the river and the lake. Let's see, as far as our chance to change any of the appeal, I wouldn't get into that. Well, I think the council can decide that. I'm not, probably everything that's on there is what they need to be doing, and then nothing should be let go on that. But I am concerned about Cadman doing any self-monitoring. We haven't trusted them in the past, and I don't think we probably can now as far as their attitudes. I do have a question on cement slabs in Kenmore. They're taller, they're thicker than I'm hearing is used all over King County, and I'm wondering if it's due to the water tables being higher here, and also all the areas in East King County, all the way from Carnation up into Snohomish County. And, I was thinking it's a real lucrative business. They're gaining like 20% more per slab that they put down in this area, and it's going to be more and more housing. So we have to look at that too. They're really gaining by being here and taking advantage of our city to serve the rest of this whole area. And if they all require 5 feet slabs, I think 4 is the very top maximum. So this is pretty impressive to me. And I heard that from somebody who lives in a home that was being flooded by houses 18 houses built on an area that has a stream and wetlands under it. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Hansen. We have no more individuals signed up for public comment at this time.
Sorry, what was that?
We have no more individuals signed up.
I'd like to invite State Representative Jerry Paulette. I saw that he's here, and I think we would all love to hear his thoughts on this permit also, if he's willing. Representative Paulette.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Mayor and members of the council and City Manager Carlin C. I came up this evening, sorry to be late from teaching, but I came up to express my deepest gratitude to the City Council, Mayor, and City Manager for 10 long years of effort to bring the asphalt plant under regulation. And I want to thank you for the listening sessions. They were very informative, the ones I attended. And I want to hearken back to, in terms of appreciation, to a meeting in Rob's office or upstairs here, where despite our best efforts at offering to have facilitated dialogue with the company, they had refused to even have facilitated dialogue about best management practices. The Puget Sound Clean Air Agency turned down funding from the legislature to have a facilitated dialogue about best practices. So to read a permit that includes recognition of the right of the city to conduct the air odor investigations out on the Burke-Gilman Trail or at Log Boom Park is nothing short of miraculous. Thank you for the years of effort. And I do want to say, if the company decides to appeal, I think they should heed the testimony from David Morton about the record, clearly establishing that they have a lot more to fear from a deepening investigation. And I would say it's not over. So if there is more that needs to be done legislatively, it's been my honor to represent Kenmore until the end of this year. And now you'll be in the first LD, but do not hesitate we will work together. The 46th is right next door, and many of our residents from the 46th breathe the fumes as well. So thank you very, very much for all the years of effort. Really appreciate Rob's work and Dennis's expertise and Cascadia Law's work. Thank you.
Thank you. We really can't thank you enough for all the work that for your partnership with the city and hard work, and all beyond this issue. It's been invaluable. We're now going to adjourn the special meeting and call the regular meeting to order. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Here.
Mayor Herbig.
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Present.
Councilmember File.
Present.
And Councilmember Baker and Councilmember Kugler have been excused.
Yep. Would you all please stand and join me in the flag salute? Next on the agenda is agenda approval. Unless there's any objection, the agenda will stand approved as published. Hearing no objection, the agenda stands approved. Next, we have a presentation, Environmental Education Research Center, Little Redfish Lost and Found presentation presented by Assistant City Manager Stephanie Lucash and University of Washington Bothell Professor Jeffrey Jensen.
Professor Jensen.
UW Bothell, and I'm also involved with the Environmental Education and Research Center up at St. Edward's. And I want to thank you for allowing me to come and talk about salmon a little bit today. As we know, salmon is a very big part of our culture. And when we think of salmon, we're often thinking about, oh, the big Chinook or the coho, the things that really draw a lot of attention. But what I wanted to say a little bit about today was a really interesting, unique, very local population of salmon that, in addition to having a lot of cultural and historical importance, also provides a lot of opportunities for some really interesting restoration work. So the fish I'd like to talk about today are the type of salmon are called kokanee salmon, and that's a landlocked version of sockeye salmon. If we were to go back, say 100, 120 years, that would be by far the predominant kind of salmon that we have around here. They're very well adapted to very small streams. They live out in the lake where they mature and come back to, well, places like Swamp Creek, as we'll see in a little bit. We're just loaded with them. Macalaire and Lion just down the road here have very nice histories of lots of kokanee salmon in them. And they gradually disappeared over the 20th century throughout almost their entire range. But they were very much a part of indigenous culture here. A lot of fishing camps set up around Lake Washington were actually set up there to harvest kokanee. And early settlers made a lot of comment about just how abundant they were. So this gives more or less the distribution of kokanee salmon 120 years ago. It's color-coded by different runs as people have described them. There was an early run that was in Issaquah Creek. That was declared extinct around 2002. There was a middle run. That's the yellow one that was in all of these streams around here and streams going into Sammamish River. That one's been a little bit more of a mystery about exactly what happened. And then the green population, the late run, you may have heard about because that's an ongoing conservation effort that's been happening for quite a long time up in Lake Sammamish. So the gentleman with the sideburns there was the entire natural history department for the University of Washington in the 1880s. And he actually collected some of these fish. So we know these were native. This is before there were any salmon introduced into the Lake Washington system. So unlike the Chinook and the coho and most of the sockeye, these were here long before European settlers were. So these were collected in the 1800s. So we've got a nice record of what was here, both in terms of the biology and earlier accounts. So Kenmore clearly had its own population of kokanee salmon. Swamp Creek was a very important site. There were egg harvests there. There were some papers written from the 30s and 20s. I have some fish that were collected in kokanee collected in Swamp Creek in the 20s and 30s here that I'm trying to do genetics on. So again, there's a very nice record very locally for these salmon, and they're unique to this lake and adjacent streams. So it ties in very nicely here. So as I mentioned, the early run was declared extinct in 2002. The late run struggles along. It had a nice year last year, but it doesn't look so good this year so far. And the middle run, which would have been local, most people thought that that run was also extinct. So I was quite surprised when I was on the streams in 2017 and I noticed very kokanee-like fish. And I thought, well, this is peculiar because they're not supposed to be here anymore. And then I started talking to other people and they said, oh yeah, 2011, there was a really big run of fish that seemed like kokanee. And people thought, well, maybe these were fish that had been introduced from somewhere else, or maybe they were non-native fish of some kind. So that made me sad because the kokanee being so local, I thought this would be a really fun thing to still have around. So I run a salmon watchers program. I got a lot of people out there on the streams telling me what they were finding. And in 2020, we'll skip that for right now. In 2020, I started noticing, boy, we're getting a lot of these fish showing up. There's a movie here. This is in the Sammamish River at the mouth of Little Bear Creek. Doesn't play too smoothly here. Those are all kokanee. Long after the sockeye are gone, we had this large run of small fish that nobody really had any idea what they were. So I said, this sounds like a job for genetics. We did genetic work on this, and these, don't worry about the axes, but the circles more or less represent different populations of sockeye and kokanee. And we started looking at genetics of these fish that we were finding that I called mystery NERCA. And lo and behold, they turned out to be kokanee after all. And comparing them with lots of populations throughout the Pacific Northwest, it was clear that they came from this basin. So that was really surprising. I don't think anybody was expecting that at that point. So that raises a lot of really interesting issues, both for concern for that population, but also for restoration. And just as a very brief aside, I'll mention that in Lake Sammamish, there's a small stream, Zakoos Creek, that hadn't had kokanee for 50 years. Last year, for the first time in 50 years, we got a return of kokanee to Zakoos. And in some ways, it's a very inspiring story for returning fish to streams where they once were and are no longer found. And the way that was done included a lot of citizen education. It included remote site egg incubators that help protect eggs from being lost in floods and into predators. There was a lot of habitat restoration. In fact, many of the kinds of things that you already have going on around here. So one of the things that I've been particularly interested in is having restoration to some of these small streams where you can't find kokanee now, like Swamp Creek as a wonderful candidate. I haven't heard of any sockeye or kokanee there for quite a long time. Again, we know they were there. We've got nice descriptions of what was there and when. And you've got some nice habitat restoration you've done at Wallace Swamp Creek Park and at other places. So it's a really enticing candidate for doing some kinds of restoration. And I've been working with remote site incubators and outreach for probably 5 or so years now. One of the things that's concerning about this kokanee population is it has a very limited spawning area. So I'm hoping to find these small streams and increase the range of areas in which it will spawn. On the lower right is some spawning area in lower North Creek. And a little bit of a peculiar population because my view was it only runs every 3rd year. It was as if the intervening years just didn't exist. So this image is from 2020, which is a really big year. I was sure we weren't going to be seeing any until 2023, but I was very surprised this year in that the streams, or at least the Sammamish and North Creek, are loaded with them at the moment. So there's a lot of really basic biology we still need to learn, but that's a happy surprise. But they still have a very limited spawning area, lower North Creek, parts of the Sammamish River, and as far as I can tell, nowhere else on a regular basis. And that raises concerns because, well, I'd say about 85% of the spawning happens right here at the mouth of Little Bear Creek. I don't have a lot of backstory on this picture, but it was probably taken in late summer, pretty close to the spawning window. There's some sort of coffer dam up, I think related to a sewage project. There is a plume of sediment coming down from construction up Little Bear, and that's right smack dab in the middle of the main spawning area. So one of the things I want to do is get people to know about these fish so that we don't have one bad year where we do something at the wrong time and maybe take out the whole population. I'm less concerned now that there's multiple years of spawning, but still they're quite vulnerable to the kinds of things that we can do. So what I'm hoping to do is get the cities of Woodinville, Bothell, Kenmore, Lake Forest Park, and Kirkland, all of whom have either spawning populations or candidate streams, collaborating on restoration, both in terms of maybe writing grants that would make this attractive, but also just being aware of these fish and working on them in ways that may foster distributing them across a broader range of streams rather than having them so local and so concentrated. And I'll just mention the kokanee work group up on Lake Sammamish has done a wonderful job of making kokanee there an iconic species. When they talk about restoration, when they apply for grants, when they do any number of things, kokanee figure very prominently. And why should they have all the fun? We've had our own kokanee population at one point, and we would have a really wonderful success story if we could bring them back to some of our small streams. So thank you. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Questions? I am not. Deputy Mayor?
Oh, it's a real, I mean, I have a question, but I think you did answer it. What exactly can we do? I mean, this is such important, critical work, and it will really improve our chances at all sorts of habitat restoration along the Sammamish River. It's critical for climate and for salmon, to do this work. So I'm really thankful, but if you have anything specific, I like the idea of partnering with our neighbors. I guess the question would be, is it worthwhile for Kenmore to start working on grants independently before coordinating with other cities, or what would you suggest?
Oh, so one of the challenges with Kokanee is people are very focused on, as you know, Chinook and Sockeye, because they're either commercially important or they are listed on the ESA. I would like to draw a little bit more attention to the fact that we have this native fish here rather than restoring fish that aren't native, and that they're also well suited to these streams. So I think what places like Kenmore can do is show an interest in these. So say when we talk to the VIII funding board or some other place, say, well, you know, we have cultural reasons, historical reasons, and good biological reasons why these fish should be in our small streams. So just being a voice supporting this in just more immediate practical terms, at some point I would like to have remote site incubators in Swamp Creek, being able to have the city's cooperation and maybe working together on some of the grant funding for that would be a wonderful thing. So I don't view it as a highly expensive thing necessarily, but a lot of different people need to be involved. I'll just briefly mention, in addition to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe would need to sign off on anything that involves salmon restoration, knowing that there's broad interest from municipalities, and also making the case that anything we do to help Kokanee is also going to help Chinook and Sockeye are messages that we can use to help convey that message, I think, to the Muckleshoot tribe.
Wonderful. And I think I have a RIA 8 meeting this Friday. So I have good timing to bring something up in my comments there.
You're welcome to any of my movies or slides.
Yeah.
You can
Well, yes, I was thinking I would really like to maybe have some access. I know they have a lot of access too, but this is great timing for my next meeting. So
okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Shrubnik?
Yeah, this is great. Totally excited about this. I, in a, feels like a past life now, ran the after school salmon development program at the elementary school, which of course is right on Wallace Swamp Creek, on Swamp Creek. So I guess my ask is, you know, if there is a way to engage the kids, since it's right there. I mean, we had, you know, salmon eggs developing in a tank and put them in the stream, and it was quite a, you know, it was pretty special actually. So I don't know whether they still do that, but I think there was an excitement about it when they can actually see that occurring, and so it's just a thought.
I'll just briefly mention that, yeah, they still do salmon in the schools. I teach a salmon biology course, and it's amazing how many students that was their first introduction to salmon. McKenna Sweet Dorman with the Snoqualmie tribe has written a Kokanee curriculum that's part of this since time immemorial curriculum. And I think it's used by Lake Washington School District. I don't know if it's used here, but that would fit in quite nicely with any Kokanee restoration. You may know of the mural that we just put in Lake Forest Park. And there's one over at Spuds, a big Kokanee, gigantic Kokanee mural. The one in LFP is right across from Brookside Elementary, so that will be combined in with some of what they do. So there's a lot of opportunities to engage the public.
Councilmember Marshall?
Can people learn more about this at the Environmental Center in St. Edwards?
Oh, well, it turns out we just got the ability to go in there and do stuff and hold talks. It took forever to get that up and running. So at some point there will be talks, and this is one of the things that we highlight up there. Yeah, the streams, I would love to be able to do this in the stream that's there, but it's a little bit of a small stream for that. It's possible, but we'll see. Actually, I wanted to talk to the people in Arrowhead because there's a little bit of stream there that would make a very reasonable Kokanee restoration site.
More?
Okay, yeah, please do.
Any other questions? Councilmember File.
Thank you. One of the things I'm hearing about issues that can help with salmon restoration are simple measures cities can do. And I know the governor took great interest in ensuring that cities across Washington state started utilizing organic compost for stormwater runoff as a filtration, as a level of filtration. Do you recommend that for Kenmore? Is that something that we could adopt?
So I would say for Kokanee, of all the amazing things that they somehow survived, like the coal mining and the deforestation and all these other things, probably one of the most critical things has been stormwater runoff, because it scours eggs out of streams and makes survival very low. So anything that would slow down the movement of water into the stream and detoxify it on the way, I think it'd be a great thing to do. I would love to see stormwater controlled as much as possible, because I think particularly for Kokanee, that's a major issue.
And last question, the school-based programs. I know that they, so schools have to opt in to having a tank on site for the science-based learning and then release. And I believe that our local Title I school, Kenmore Elementary, had participated for a number of years, and there's been a gap. I'd like to see that picked up, but I'm also thinking, is such a program a great opportunity for daycares and other agencies like Washington State Parks and St. Edwards?
I see some people in this room who would probably be certainly more than well qualified to help maintain salmon rearing in schools. And yeah, there's a lot of that done. And it's not hard. So I've been using remote site incubators with coho eggs because they're relatively easy to permit and get. But having a little bit of Kokanee going would be something more local, and I think at least as interesting.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much. Really appreciate the presentation. Next on the agenda, public comments. We welcome our community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the council is to listen. We'll hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you're online, please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. All guests must address comments to the mayor and city council. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it's your turn. Your time will start when we can confirm that we can hear you. Please state your name and city of residence for the record and keep your comments to the allotted time. We will not split your time with others or reset your time except by express approval of the presiding officer. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the clerk or council in advance. Please do not comment about pending development projects on which the council will make future decisions, as those are quasi-judicial matters and council members must limit their communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for taking the time to express your comments. And before we start, I would like the record to reflect that Councilmember Baker is now in attendance. All right, thank you. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We currently have 5 speakers signed up on site. We're going to take them in this order. Peter Lance, followed by Roy Kuzner, Patrick O'Brien, John Peoples, and Jim Myers.
Hello, my name is Peter Lance. I live in Kenmore, and I wanted to speak to you briefly about the missing middle issue. A few weeks ago, you might recall I testified and commented how creating duplex and triplex zoning was going to increase the value of property and encourage the discouragement of, well, bulldozing affordable houses. And affordable housing was one of your primary goals of the city of Kenmore, is to maintain it and preserve it. An example of just what I was talking about happens to be at a short plat at 8226 Northeast 145th in Kenmore. This is an example. This is a short plat, but it is an increased enhanced use of property where you can get more housing out of it. And at this house, this location, because it can be subdivided, a perfectly good, affordable house is going to be bulldozed, assuming the short plat is approved, and I see no reason why it won't. So your duplex and triplex thrown out throughout the city indiscriminately is going to, that you can drive by it and you can see it. You can see a perfectly good house is going to disappear, and it's going to happen again and again throughout the city as duplexes and triplexes replace affordable houses. You've opened up more of this. It's very important as you go forward to try and discourage the development of affordable houses. and very carefully pick where you're going to increase the density of the property. So that when a house has reached to the end of its useful life, you're going to hopefully get more than, now I'm going to get off piste here, but more than a duplex or a triplex. You had a beautiful presentation of the missing middle with much higher density, tastefully and elegantly done, and hopefully affordably. When you drive by the short plat, you see it's not timely. We don't need the density there. You've identified your corridors there and encouraged the growth along the corridors, and hopefully more along the lines of the missing middle. But the address is 8226 Northeast 145th, and you can see a perfect example of what I was talking about. The duplex triplex is going to displace your affordable housing.
Roy Kuzner.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and staff members here. My name is Roy Kuzner, and with my spouse Terry, we live, we're resident, 13-year residents at the Coventry Place condominium across the way. And I want to alert you to an urgent safety matter with regard to this intersection of 68th Northeast and 182nd. This intersection has in excess of 7,000 vehicles daily, according to the 2015 arterial traffic volume study. 68th and 182nd combined to that total of 7,000. However, vehicle volumes originating from the Coventry condominium and all now the Spencer 68 apartments across the way were not included because that was built after that time. Right now we have between adding the units in the Coventry condominium and Spencer 68, there are 320 residential units. Now the vehicle volume easily exceeds the aggregate number of units with those projects. And I'm sure that the Spencer and Coventry vehicles will significantly add to this outdated aerial traffic study. Unfortunately, the public, or undoubtedly, I'm sorry, the Pulte construction project, which is going to come down later, of course, is going to add to the burden of that section. But there is a critical issue right now, which would like to explain. Many residents driving, exiting Spencer 68 and Coventry have reported near misses automobile accidents from commuters and other traffic heading south down on 68th to Bothell Way. It is nearly impossible to see vehicles coming due to the parked cars and the aggressive driving somewhat of the commuters, and that's pretty as consistent during the day. And what happens is the vehicles creep out into the intersection beyond where you probably could be ticketed because you can't see and you can't do anything else except to creep out there. And then suddenly a vehicle, you can't see it, and it will come.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzner. Your time is up.
And okay, thank you.
Patrick O'Brien.
Hey there. I enjoyed the presentation by Jeff Jensen. Thank you for being here. One of the things I noted that there seems to be a lack of scientific questioning by the city council. One thing we can do to increase the salmon habitat is don't put any asphalt parking lots next to the Sammamish Slough or any tributary of that. And we've just done that at our new park. So parks and streams, you got to keep the asphalt right. The asphalt degradates, all that oil, all those tars goes into the stream, and you're just making it easier for it to put it right next to the stream. Next question would have been dissolved oxygen. That's very important for the life of all marine aquatic life. And so the correlation is with what's the temperature. He showed the 1930s, the stream temperatures. My question would have been, what's the stream temperatures now? For every degree that the stream changes temperature, it's a multiple of dissolved oxygen that isn't in that substrate for the breathing of the fish. No question like that was answered. And then they had a concern about the runoff. Well, the waterfall is a runoff. It's a big one. And what does it do? It puts a lot of oxygen in the water, which is very important as stated. So there are ways to turbulate the water with the runoff and induce oxygen into that. So nobody's asking about that. And then work on your setbacks and shading. If you really want to change the temperature of the slough, you're going to make sure the trees and the setbacks aren't affected. And I know plywood supply over the years has crept in and crept in and crept in closer and closer to the Sammamish Slough with their places to store wood and stuff. And nobody has ever scrutinized that and done a time lapse of how close they've encroached. So that's just on that one thing. Now, when we're talking about enforcement, we don't have people that are able to take a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning when the asphalt plant or any activity is going on out at the well, you know where it is. It's right out there. I feel like Joe Biden right now. At any rate, we need to authorize staff to take the bull by the horns and be able to go down there at some off hours and do some enforcement. And I would really encourage that you allow the police chief to issue citations based on noise and hours of operation. Thank you.
John Peoples, Kenmore. Good evening, Kenmore City Council. I hope you're all well this brilliant fall day. Now that we've celebrated Columbus Day in Kenmore last month, we can all look forward to Thanksgiving this month, when Americans give thanks to God for the many blessings we enjoy. I look forward to spotting some kokanee from the newly renovated Squires Landing Park. But later this evening, you will most likely wrongly accept the DIEA policy. I dearly hope you don't adopt this toxic policy. Truth is, it's not necessary. This deceitful policy promotes a false sense of need for it while ignoring the fact that many of its tenets already exist, all the while deliberately directing racist abuse at some members of the community. First, the plan to transition from a task force to an advisory committee is intended in part to avoid the openness required by the open meetings process. That's not inclusion. Second, one of the planks in the expectations of municipal employees is to, quote, honor the pronouns and gender expression, unquote, of anyone wishing to pretend he is something he is not. What this is a requirement to lie, since it is physically impossible for a man to become a woman and vice versa. It is not compassionate, equitable, nor inclusive to indulge in a mentally ill person's delusion. It is fully compassionate to tell him the truth. It is my expectation that no Kenmore municipal employee be treated badly for refusing to lie on someone else's behalf. Lastly, the existence of the racist propaganda and racially slanderous piece called the white supremacy pyramid on the Kenmore City website is a violation of several planks in the policy's code of conduct. For these reasons, you must recognize that the DIEA policy is inherently hypocritical. It is my civic hope that the contract be canceled and this toxic policy not be adopted. It is simply not necessary. I do sincerely wish those currently employed in this endeavor gainful employment in some area more useful to the community. If you do not have the courage to oppose it, please resign now. Otherwise, please be prepared to give up your council positions to the winners of next year's election. Regardless of what you do tonight, do know that this policy will eventually be discontinued by some brave future Kenmore City Council. I welcome a conversation with anyone on this topic. Thank you and good night.
Jim Myers.
Good evening. My name is Jim Myers. I'm a resident of Kenmore. I've got good news. I'm here to thank Dr. Jensen for his work, for getting people like me out of our homes and going out to the streams and looking for fish. And I think, you know, he is a whole network of volunteer stream watchers. They're doing water quality. They're looking for fish all the time. And in a sense that their presence sort of helps with protecting the streams. And I think, you know, as it was asked what Kenmore can do, I think grants and all these things help, but the one thing you alone have the power to do is to enforce the critical areas ordinances that we have that protect our streams. We can't do that as volunteers. We can scare poachers off. We do a lot of things. We can report things, but we can't do that piece of bringing kokanee back. And I think it is doable. You can go out to North Creek now, behind the Country Inn and Suites. I didn't tell you to go there, but if you walk over on the other side of the dike, there's easily 50 to 100 kokanee that are now beginning to put down their eggs and start a whole new generation. Kokanee, probably in the world of climate change, may be one of the last salmon we'll have here. They don't go out to the ocean. They spawn late in the season. They're spawning now. It's cool. And their fry move to the lake very early in the spring, so they don't have to deal with hot summer temperatures. If you go out and look at them, you might notice little holes from our friend Hank the heron. They're part of the ecosystem. They provide a great source of nutrients, not only for herons, but for eagles, ospreys, and all the other organisms that live in the streams. So really, that's it. We need to work on fixing culverts. They're small fish. They can't dig a deep red. They can't move big gravel. Storm surges wash out their eggs because they can't be buried down very far. They can't jump high into a culvert. One of my friends who was a biologist for the tribes, went to this one culvert that used to be on Little Bear Creek. Culvert was placed up high in a rockery, and he pulled 40 kokanee out from between the rocks that had jumped in there and got stuck and of course died. So yes, let's all work together. I think this is something that we can do, and I think gives everyone ownership of our natural resources.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Elizabeth Mooney.
Hi, good evening, Elizabeth Mooney, Kenmore. Thank you, Councilmember O'Kane, for bringing up the opportunity to bring Jeff Jensen's pictures to the VIII. I am so happy you're back in town and excited. If they have virtual Zooms, I want to be there, or in person now. Thank you. I know for sure that people for environmentally responsible Kenmore want to be part of this kokanee restoration. Years ago, when Marilyn Chase was our senator, Jim Matilla, who these fisheries people know, he suggested that stream 0056, Raya 8 0056, Chetchatel, the one that goes into Log Boom Park, would be appropriate for kokanee. The problem is, and I support what Jim Myers was just saying, is the culvert that WashDOT now has to remove because of the tribal decisions. That one, if I'm not mistaken, Our manager can tell you more about what's going on there, but that culvert is mandated to come out. So whatever we can do as a nonprofit, as citizens, to get that removed so that the fish can come back up and come back up from the lake, whether it's kokanee or coho, we are here to support that. So one last thing, our friend Kate Donaldson did ask me to talk about the asphalt issues, and she just said, please read this. So she had meant to come to the meeting that Rob Carlinzi held at the hangar. Thank you so much for having that. And she said, Rob, in light of the new information we've received, I think it is important that all Kenmore citizens be informed of the potential health risks from the emissions coming from the Cadman asphalt plant. We have worked so hard to obtain independent testing at the site to get a better understanding of what we are inhaling and to learn of any potential carcinogens. Thank you, Rob, for your continued service and helping to make Kenmore the best, friendliest, and healthiest community. And that's from my friend who, I think you know, Kate Donaldson, lives above the Ostrom's spot. So she is vulnerable to those emissions that come there, and has mentioned to you that she has tasted it in her sheets. So on a happy note, let's get healthy. Thank you so much, Dr. Jeff Jensen, for coming here. And thank you, City of Kenmore, for letting the CATS program have their graduation here. Thanks, co-CATS Rob Carlinzi. And looking forward to working with the city.
Mayor, I have no additional on-site speakers signed up. Can we move on to virtual?
Yes.
If you are attending virtually and would like to give public comment at this time, please raise your hand. I have currently 6 individuals signed up, and we'll go in this order. Dakota Rash, followed by Stacy Valenzuela, Phyllis Finley, Tracy Benishinsky, Nancy Hansen, and Richard. Please provide your last name for the record. Dakota, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Dakota Rash. I'm a resident of Lake Forest Park. Just in case anyone was here for the potential harmful comment earlier, trans men are men and trans women are women. You are valid and wonderful. So I was actually pretty crestfallen and actually fairly scared and panicked by the discussion I heard on the 7th regarding funding the CAP. When I saw that the plan was to essentially find more funding, I just lost heart. That's not good enough. I saw a plan to maybe get 2 people and then get the CAP in full swing by 2025, and that's not enough. We just don't have 3 years to take action. I mean, y'all don't even really have time in your climate action plan. Just look at the carbon reduction timeline proposed in that CAP. It proposes carbon emissions that reduce starting now, not by 2025. Hiring 2 people to try and find funding for this work will be a fool's errand and actually a waste of money. Because while you sit there planning on how to try and find funds to take necessary action, your problem is growing exponentially. You'll be chasing a never-ending train of moving goalposts, and you will not accomplish those goals. I'd also like to share incredible frustration at the vagueness with which the plan is discussed. Is there a plan? Terms like high-level priorities are used, but what does that mean? The CAP doesn't use that term. Do you mean actions that are a high level of likely reducing emissions? Which timeline are you talking about? Short term, medium term, long term? I mean, I sincerely hope that there are good intentions behind this, but right now it honestly feels like fluff for presentation's sake. In the same vein, I see the term outreach used a lot. Outreach is incredibly important. As someone who has gone out on the streets and canvassed and made phone calls, I agree. But it's at its most valuable to help pressure people in positions like yours to take necessary action. It should not be used as a path to have people in decision-making positions be able to look like they're doing something. This is a crisis, and it's the crisis of our age. It will define the future of our species. How we respond to it will literally be the deciding factor in whether we get to continue living comfortable lives within the next decade. Please take time to live in that space. in that truly terrifying reality that what is the terrifying reality, sorry, I'm getting a little emotional, of what is going to happen if we don't avert this mass extinction event. It sucks to live in that space, I know, but you as decision makers have a responsibility to know fully about what we are fighting. Please treat this like the crisis it is. The discussion on the 7th didn't.
Thank you, Dakota. Stacey Valenzuela.
Good evening again, Stacey Valenzuela, Kenmore. People love Kenmore because of the open spaces, natural habitat, trees, and wildlife. We need the permits, ordinances, and our city staff to protect these areas, our shoreline, streams, salmon, against encroachment on wetlands, clear-cutting trees, and causing bigger concerns. We need all task force and committees to include community that's passionate for the cause. We need presentations to include both sides of an issue. To be fair, clear pros and cons should be included in each presentation to show what may be the consequences of a big change, like rezoning, adding street barriers, redirecting a stream if adopted by our city. We need to stop the cementing of natural habitat in parks, increasing greenhouse gases by 30% and 8% to global warming, heat, as well as the third largest source of our pollution. Our natural resources should be protected over recreational activities and development. Decisions. How is it that a farmer's market, a good thing that the city spends $80,000 on, costs to run with only a revenue of $13,000, is a huge loss? And yet the city continues and wants to double that cost. Kenmore neighbors complained about no parking, little selection, and blocking of several businesses in downtown main corridor. Just think if that $80,000 was spent on pop-up small shops like Bothell, put up and shared by local businesses with rent being charged to pay for the cost, how much nicer that would be. We were told that public services by outside contractors were now being performed by public work hires. Seems only the name change from contracted out to enhanced services, but the work is still being contracted out for street sweepers, snow plows, sidewalk patches. We need a workforce housing 45 to 60% medium income level to keep workers and businesses in Kenmore, or we will lose businesses. We need affordable housing of 30% or we will have more living in tents. Just a few weeks ago, some received notices at my senior manufactured home that is being sold. Rents are raising, pricing out the seniors. In the mobile home park zone, updated with 5920 and House Bill 1582, states the goals of both of those are keeping affordable housing. Clearly seen time after time, the staff supports opposite criteria of the council and residents. Perhaps the Planning Commission would handle criteria with integrity. We'll see that with the efforts of just a few staffs, affordable housing development can and is happening in Kenmore. Imagine what would happen if more staff was supporting the top priorities of the council and our residents, the affordable housing and climate change, and following their direction and that of our resident concerns, the will of the people. Thank you.
Phyllis Finley, go ahead.
Phyllis Finley, Kenmore. I'm remembering a few years ago on a beautiful sunny day just like today, running on the Burt Gilman Trail, breathing deeply and saying to myself with a bit of awe, that fluffy white steam against the brilliant blue sky is simply stunning. What a fool. Little did I know what the contents were that were and are spewing out of that stack, and that I was sucking deeply into my lungs. But why didn't I know? How could pollution of this magnitude be happening right under my nose, pun intended, for so many years, and I be completely oblivious? Our city knew. Our city has known for a very long time. That I, along with my Kenmore neighbors, have been until recently largely kept in the dark about the Cadman pollution machine is no accident. If the city is not able or not willing to do more to protect Kenmore residents from the Cadman pollution than is required by the new permit, You have a responsibility at the very least to keep us informed and updated regarding our poor air quality. North Shore Utility District regularly publishes data about our water quality and contents. The quality and contents of the air we breathe is more important. We can choose our drinking water source. We're stuck with the air that surrounds us. I have 5 suggestions toward the goal of informing the public about Kenmore's perpetually polluted air. Number 1, send out one of your large, colorful postcards each quarter with air quality results for that quarter. Include a QR code to easily access more information. Number 2, the Fabulous 4 is distributed every Friday. Add one short line, such as, this week's air quality has been, fill in the blank. Include a QR code to easily access more information. Number 3, instead of a giant heron banner hanging from the Cadman stack, hang a giant banner with 4 simple words. This is not steam. Include a giant QR code to easily access more information. 4, include quarter sheet flyers at Log Boom Park to inform users of their proximity to fallout from the Cadman stack. Include a QR code to easily access more information. And finally, number 5, require that every house, condo, and apartment on the market include a disclosure statement about the polluted air in the same way that disclosures are required about the status of Kenmore's poor air quality and offer user-friendly methods for reporting. Thank you.
Tracy Benishinsky.
Hello, Council. I did not prepare remarks tonight, so I am speaking to you directly from my heart. I am sitting on the couch next to my kiddo. He's 10 years old. I have been trying to prioritize my evenings to be with him. The reason I am here today is because our climate and environment are too important for me to stay away. The presentation that Jeff gave you tonight about kokanee, I'm glad he was there with images of those beautiful fish. I know we all want to keep those beautiful fish in our streams. We want to keep those beautiful fish in our streams. We need to fully fund the climate action plan. The fish will not survive if our waters keep warming. As a commenter earlier pointed out, in warmer water, there's less dissolved oxygen. There's not enough dissolved oxygen in the water. The fish won't be able to breathe. They're breathing oxygen through the water. We need to slow down and stop our warming climate. If we want to keep those fish, we need to fully fund habitat restoration in Kenmore and have healthy, vibrant riparian zones on all of our tributaries and the Sammamish River. If we want to keep those fish, we need to spend money. I know it's hard. It's hard when you see a big sticker about how much it will take to fully fund the CAP. It's hard to say yes to that. But if we don't say yes to that, we're not going to be doing the things that we need to do to keep those fish. When I first got involved in salmon recovery efforts, I was told, we know what we need to do to recover salmon in this region. We just haven't spent the money that we need to do it. And that was 10 years ago. So we need to do that. We need to prioritize it with our dollars. So I'm coming here giving you full permission. You have my full permission to fully fund the CAP. And I know you have that same support from so many people in our community who haven't come tonight. So that's all I want to say. I'll come next time with more numbers and statistics and data to back up what's in my heart. But thank you.
Nancy Hansen, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to add some more. I'm sorry, earlier I was trying to delete because I couldn't do it all in 3 minutes, so I shouldn't do that. But I support Jim Meyer's comments on bringing back kokanee, and I also respond to Peter Lance saying about the bulldozing of a single home to make more duplexes. There's no other way that duplexes and triplexes are going to be built. I've looked around the neighborhood and realized that just by looking around, there's no way to add on to most of the houses. They're too close. You couldn't, it's not going to work unless once, something's removed and this whole process starts over. So it's not, it's not good. Anyway, and Dr. Jeff Jensen said the issue of slowing down water flow and detoxifying the water as well as needing to nourish the water. He didn't mention that, but that's really, really important for bringing salmon back. With all the streams disrupted and rerouted around here, we really need to be putting some money into wetland mapping so we can get a handle on where we can build without getting into the critical areas, both wetlands and steep slopes. I would like more time to discuss all of this actually in a little roundtable discussing just this issue. If we keep building on the top of streams and wetlands and like steep slopes, like at 80th and 198th, I can't believe, huge, really steep slope, and it's wet up above. All the water has now been contained down below. It's just sluggish and getting, it's not clean because it's not running through. It's just awful. And there's no way we can get salmon back if we don't map our wetlands and have a handle on where our water is. So I'd like to see that done. I'd like to see the council allot some money or, authorize some money to be able to do that. I think we can do it for less than having a corporation come in and do it. It's like $50 an hour and you wouldn't have to do everything. It's two parts. You do the land part with a wetland specialist needed, and then you have a mapping program. And I'm looking into all of these things and I'll report back when I find out more about them, about the mapping program. There was something being updated and fixed to make the mapping easier on a program like the ArcGIS, like you have in Kenmore. So anyway, I think we can do that and it will help planning. How can you plan without knowing what's underground? So thank you very much.
Richard, please provide your last name for the record, followed by Danielle Olson.
Good evening, Mayor Herbig and council members. This is Richard Lewis, resident of Kenmore. When I noticed that DEI was on the docket for tonight, I read some related documents on our website and came up with a few comments. One thing I noticed is that no one anticipates an endpoint regarding DEI initiatives. It looks like the advisory committee will always want to do more research, more deliberation, more recommendations, more engagement, more influence with no ends in sight. Apparently, there will never be enough improvement in the coming years in diversity, equity, or inclusion such that we no longer need experts, external benchmarks, or advisory groups. Anyway, the fact that there appears to be no endpoint is of some concern. Are we anticipating limited success in these initiatives? And on a different matter, it has been suggested that the new DEI advisory committee be exempted from OPMA requirements. Those are, of course, Open Public Meeting Act requirements. That is, it should be set free from rules or of quorum and public disclosure. But that runs counter to one of the 8 official DEI drivers, namely transparency and accountability. You can't have it both ways. Anyway, I believe the DEI advisory committee should be subject to OPMA requirements. Thank you.
Danielle Olson, go ahead.
Hi, this is Danielle Olson. I live in Kenmore, and I wanted to talk about 2 things. First, please fully fund the climate action plan. This is very important, especially to younger families in this area. Second, I wanted to talk about the asphalt plant. The proposed requirements and conditions for the Cadman asphalt plant's retroactive permit to replace and repair equipment seems reasonable and accommodating to Cadman, if not as robust as many community members might prefer. Although it is a good starting point, neighbors worry that it is not robust enough to protect the health and well-being of the surrounding community. To the greatest extent possible, the asphalt facility should be held to higher standards because it is a potential public health hazard. According to maps in the application for the permit, the poor air quality and reported asphalt fumes from the facility reach residential neighborhoods as well as areas with elementary schools, daycare centers, and retirement homes. When I walk in the area in the mornings, the asphalt smell is particularly strong along the Burke-Gilman Trail and near Mazur's Dog Grooming and Pet Shop, the library, community coffee shops, dental clinics, restaurants, and other businesses that serve customers throughout the region. This personal experience is backed by the map for the permit application. People doing business here smell the asphalt plant. Likewise, as people ride their bicycles on the trail through the city, they experience the highest level of air pollution from the asphalt plant. This is damaging to property values. It adds to Kenmore's reputation. The Cadman asphalt facility is non-conforming land use in Kenmore. That means it cannot expand into neighboring parcels. However, as far as I know, Kenmore's regulations do not stop the facility from upgrading to higher quality equipment that better meets healthy air quality standards. Neighbors in the Kenmore community have come together on this. Cadman needs to be held accountable for adverse health effects caused by the facility. Thank you.
Mayor, I have no additional hands raised at this time.
All right, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Councilmember Pyle.
Second, Deputy Mayor.
We have a motion and a second. And any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? The consent agenda stands approved. Next up, we have two public hearings this evening, and we'll do them in this order. The 2023-2024 proposed final biennial budget, ordinance number 22-0562, presented by Finance Administration Director Leticia Salcido. And then we will have the public hearing on the 2021-2022 budget amendments, ordinance number 22-0561, presented by Finance and Administration Director Leticia Salcido. Staff will have an opportunity to present prior to each public hearing being opened. For each public hearing, you'll be granted 5 minutes to speak. The same public comment rules apply, including stating your name and city of residence, addressing your comments to the council, and not splitting your time with others. If your comments have already been fully expressed by preceding speakers, we encourage you to summarize your statements by stating your name, city of residence, and saying I agree with the previous speaker. We will hear testimony from our on-site guests first, followed by virtual guests. Thank you for taking the time to participate in these public hearings. So 2023-2024 proposed final biennial budget.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. Yes, the item before you is the proposed preliminary biennial budget 2023-2024. I'm happy to say we're very close to the finish line. We've had various presentations. We started with the estimate of revenues and expenditures on September 26, followed by the reading of the budget message on October the 3rd, and distribution of the actual document. We've had various presentations and workshops where we reviewed in detail each revenue, each expenditure for each one of the funds for the city. We've had our first public hearing on November the 7th, and tonight is our second public hearing. The opportunity for the community to bring in their public testimony on the budget for 2023-2024 in the amount of 87.3 million. And the information, I had a presentation, but we've had various presentations with regards to this budget. The presentation and the listing of the funds and the related budget amounts are in the agenda packet. Thank you.
Any questions? I'm not seeing any questions. I will declare the public hearing opened. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for this public hearing?
I have no on-site guests signed up, but I do have a few virtual, if I can move on to virtual.
Of course.
If you are virtual and would like to give public comment during this public hearing, please use the raise hand function. I currently have 2 individuals with their hands raised and we'll go in this order. Phyllis Finley, followed by Stacy Valenzuela. Give me 1 moment to promote you. Phyllis, whenever you're ready.
Phyllis Finley Kenmore. I'm requesting that you vote no on ordinance 220562 without further cuts in the budget. Many times during these weeks of budget hearings and related discussions, I've heard council members weigh in on tax and fee increases with the phrase, quote, "It's just a little a month more," or "It's only a little bit more." These phrases are value judgments, and unless you're aware of every household budget in the city, your use of the term just and only are inappropriate. It's a bit of hubris to assume that because an amount is small in your opinion, working with a multi-million-dollar budget, it will be inconsequential for everyone else. I request that you adopt the philosophy of spending within our means. Prioritize items into wants and needs. Yes, fully fund the cap as you make corresponding cuts elsewhere. The wants can wait until such time that the city has funds to pay for them. It's elementary budgeting, to be sure. You spend money because you can, and you increase taxes and fees as a result because you can. It might be helpful for you to read the room, so to speak, beyond the 4 walls of City Hall. How many line item expenditures have the full or at least majority support among Kenmore taxpayers? Because those expenditures have majority support among you 7 is not indicative of general support around the city. It makes one wonder if our council is becoming increasingly out of touch with their constituents. If you put the purchase of the bench to a vote with a price tag for each taxpayer, what would be the result? If you put the boathouse extraordinaire to a vote with the price tag of how much the row club non-payment is costing each taxpayer, what would be the result? How about a $28,000 new park sign and an extravagant public works building as you have budgeted for it? What's the cost for each taxpayer? How about crafting one of your surveys again, this time with the cost attached, plus the 50% overrun that our city manager explains occurs on every project? A few years ago, you discussed raising property taxes because there was no way you could find a way to cut $32,000 from the budget. In the end, you managed to find something to cut. At that time, Council Member Srebnick, when voting against the property tax increase, said, "I'm voting no now, but it will happen in the future." Looks like the future is now. Now, when property values have just skyrocketed. The levy rate may decline, but if property values increase 32%, the actual tax paid will not decline. The effect on the hypothetical homeowner in the presentation example is an increase of $2,286, if I'm reading that right. That's not a just or a little bit. Among the reason that the property tax increase is needed, your words, not mine, is that the new budget allows employee salary and wages to align with the market. Tell that to the many teachers who live in Kenmore about having a salary align with the market. Tell that to the many landlords on whom you put restrictions to keep their rental income from aligning with the market. I'm requesting that you be willing, before you vote yes on this sometime in the future, to make more difficult choices in the budget and continue to make cuts in the many line items available for further reduction, rather than increasing property taxes. As it stands now, please vote no on ordinance 220562. Thank you.
Stacy Valenzuela, go ahead.
Stacy Valenzuela Kenmore. Please say no to the tax levy and this budget. The city is continually telling our residents that Kenmore doesn't have funds available for our concerns or needs. The residents want to see responsibility and accountability. We need the city to perform by staying within projected budget, to control overspending, to stop costly mistakes and allowing financial burdens. Continuing to allow and approving increased over budget increments on consent agenda and unnecessary financial burdens by the city management of public funds when taxing residents, especially lower income residents, is not right when 66% of our residents are cost burden. Those on fixed income struggle to put food on the table. When you, the council, adopt these increases in cost, you are condoning this waste by the city. You are failing to support the will of the residents, our community. The expenses for enhanced services, street cleaning, etc. When we have employees earning high wages, 31% more than other cities, and getting full medical expenses for their whole family. This is also an overburden on our budget. If employees do the same job description, but they fail to be cost effectiveness, they should not be employed. Please fix the budget. Adopt charging rent and fees to the row clubs, the waterfront activity club, the field users to offset the maintenance for those things. We are already cost burden. That would be about $59K. Stop giving those additional recreation funds at the expense of taxing our low and fixed income residents by taxing utilities, charging card tab fees. This group is already going hungry. There's what, 30 more thousand? The parents can afford to pay for those kind of services rather than veterans, seniors, and disabled. Reject items that are not necessary on the capital and other budget segments without further cause of financial burden. Reject the replacement sign at the boathouse. That's another $28K. Rescind the North Shore School District lease that is giving payment to Peacock. That's another $10K. Why is it going to them instead of the general maintenance fund? Doesn't the city do the maintenance? Collect the $560K and adopt a lease for the rent. That would be what? Almost $600K. Reject the amount of the new public works building and limit the project to $5 million, a prefab green building. That's another what? $20K. Reject the $164K for the farmers market and vendors that made millions and only paid the city $13K at a loss of $75K. Reject the developer variances that fail to protect and preserve our resources, including trees, wetlands, instead of adding the needs. Like they could be doing repaving, sidewalks, city services. Reject unnecessary hiring. What is that? Another $300K. Reject Twin Springs. Instead, leave the natural habitat. That's another $112K, sorry. That's over 3 to 4 million saved to go towards the CAP plan. I'm sure there's a lot more that can be saved if you dig a little deeper. I'm also hoping that there is no new building at Tolachadis because you guys said you weren't going to do that and they were going to have to use the old building and have the watercraft pay rent. Oh, look at that. We need you to fund the priorities of the council and the communities first. The climate action plan and affordable housing. Please stick to that. We're counting on you. Thank you.
Mayor, I have no additional hands raised at this time.
Is there anybody else wishing to be heard? Anyone else wishing to be heard? Is there anyone else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, I'm declaring the public hearing closed. We're now moving on to the second public hearing, 2021-2022 budget amendments, ordinance number 22-0561. Salcido.
Yes, the item before you are the budget amendments for the current budget. This is for the 2021-2022 budget. As you know, prior to closing the budget period, we need to ensure that the expenditures do not exceed the legally adopted budgets. We take into consideration increased revenues and unanticipated expenditures. On November the 7th, we had a presentation that was for review and discussion of the detail of each amendment by a fund. And tonight you have a public hearing, which is an opportunity for the community to provide their public testimony on these budget amendments. And the same thing, we have the presentation that we provided to council on November the 7th, and it is also included in the AB packet. Thank you.
Any questions before I open the public hearing? All right, seeing none, I will declare this public hearing open. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up?
I have no individual signed up for on-site public comment. Can we move on to virtual?
Of course.
If you are virtual and would like to give public comment during this public hearing, please use the raise hand function now. Stacy Valenzuela, give me one moment to promote you. Go ahead, Stacy.
I stand on the last statement that we need you and we're counting on you to not let the budget go higher. Any of the saved money that Letitia found or had returned from other expenditures, please put towards the CAP plan rather than anything else or anything recreational. And please start charging the recreational uses for our buildings and take it one step further and let's open them up to the actual public instead of just 20 to 30 people. Thank you.
Mayor, I have no additional hands raised at this time.
Is there anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Next on the agenda is the business agenda. First item is diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility policy presented by Human Resources Manager Leonora Polania and Shannon Kelly Ray Consulting, along with our DEI task force.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. As you see on the timeline, there was a competitive RFP process where the city identified Shannon Kelly Ray Consulting to lead and conduct an equity needs assessment as the city began building the diversity, equity, and inclusion policy, DEI policy. The city of Kenmore heard and listened to the community through the city's DEI task force, a team that represents the diverse communities within the city of Kenmore, with several of the task members who will continue on to contribute as DEI advisory committee members. And they're present in front of you here today. A community engagement survey was also conducted. Surveys, interviews with staff and leadership and council, and all of these efforts were led through guidance and collaboration with Shannon Kelly Ray Consulting. These recommendations created, shaped, and developed the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility policy that the city of Kenmore is presenting today, the DEIA policy. And with that policy in place, as a foundation, the city currently is working on a DEIA 5-year strategic plan, a draft with Shannon Kelly Ray Consulting, city staff, the community, and the advisory committee. And the city is looking forward to the city of Kenmore's adoption of the 5-year DEI strategic plan at the end of 2023's second quarter. And the plan will include metrics and strategic initiatives. And as mentioned, the advisory committee will assist staff with the development of the implementation plan, and the advisory committee will consist of, as mentioned, former task force members as well as other members of the Kenmore community. And through the diligence, dedication, and efforts of all who have contributed to this policy, the city is bringing this DEIA policy to the Kenmore City Council for adoption. Any questions?
Questions? I am not seeing any questions. I have just one comment, just something that I would like to see come out of all of this. At some point, you know, when we have our council agenda bills put together, there's always a little part at the bottom where it says, you know, how does this fit into council goals and budgets? And, you know, how does this fit into council goals and what are the fiscal implications of a bill? I would really like us to figure out a rubric for when we're making council decisions to have a paragraph about how this, what the impact is in kind of the DEI space. Because I do want us when we're passing ordinances, be it a budget or be it, you know, anything else, I want it to be something that staff considers and something the council has a chance to really look at, and in some sort of systematized way. And I don't know what that looks like, but that is something I would really like to see at some point as we're making decisions, because I think it's important that we take a second, like we do with fiscal impacts, and recognize any other impacts that we might not see. So I just want to toss that out there. Any other questions or comments, Councilmember Marshall?
Yeah, a comment. I just wanted to thank each and every member here for your service to the city and your service to this cause. It's very much appreciated, and bringing your life experience and your expertise and your education and the whole thing. The city thanks you for it.
If I could, Mayor Herbig.
Of course.
I wanted to offer something to you today. Well, if you'll indulge me. History in this country is replete with examples of our country at its founding not being the perfect union. But we get up every day, each of us, and endeavor to move closer to the more perfect union where everyone can have their full humanity honored, and we can build and create a community where everyone can thrive. On March 6th of 1857, United States Supreme Court Chief Justice Roger Taney said to the audience when he gave judgment regarding Plessy versus Ferguson, African Americans had for more than a century before been regarded as an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations, and so far inferior, they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, and that the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his benefit. He was bought and sold and treated as an ordinary article of merchandise and traffic whenever a profit could be made by it. And that was not overturned until, in terms of separate but equal, Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. There was also Pace versus Alabama in 1883, in which an interracial marriage meant 2 to 7 years hard labor in a state penitentiary when a Black man named Tony Pace and a white woman named Mary Cox challenged the law, and the Supreme Court upheld it. It was not overturned until Loving versus the state of Virginia in 1967. The civil rights cases of 1883, in 1875 and 1864, did not recognize and honor the humanity of all. Cumming versus Richmond in 1899, Ozawa versus the United States in 1922 the United States versus Thind in 1923, Lum versus Wright in 27. I could go on. So when people are of the opinion that there is no room or no need anymore to engage continually in these conversations, history, both past and present, is replete with examples of man's inhumanity to mankind. And so I'm proud of the city of Kenmore for engaging in this endeavor, for doing what is required and necessary to build a community that works for and with every member of the community, whether they live in Kenmore, whether they work in Kenmore, or they visit and enjoy the spaces that you create. I think that it's necessary to have deliberate, intentional conversations always, because this country, our laws and rules of order, and our people are fluid. We are ever changing. We are growing and shaping and morphing as we take in all of those that would come to our teeming shores. And as a Pacific Rim city, that is exactly who we are. We are no longer a mom and pop community, but a global community made up of the many. And this country promises e pluribus unum, out of many we become one. And the only way that we can do that is to look at the original sins of this country, where we didn't see men and women equally, and rich and poor equally, and able-bodied and differently abled equally. And we didn't recognize the full humanity of all people. This is that time, and that time for Kenmore is now to continue to reaffirm those things that we hold to be truths and values of this community. And so I am glad that you won't have to pay me always, because the plans that we design are for the council and for the directors and for leaders to own. The reason that that task force has been made an advisory stands so that the city manager, city leaders, and yourselves will have at least some chance of hearing the lived experiences, the stories, and hearing the impact, Mayor Herbeck, when you talk about the metric, on the lives of people that you don't always see in this chamber and that don't always call in. This is an opportunity for you to hear from those people in real time to understand the impacts of your decision-making. That's no different, these people sitting here, than someone walking in and saying, I would like to have 5 minutes with the city manager of the city of the community where I live. It's no different than people coming in here or standing at the front desk. This community should hope for members that are marginalized, that are disenfranchised, and that are underutilized to show up and share their voices. So I offer this work to you that is not something that I've built of my own regard, but I am simply the messenger, sharing with you what your staff and what your community has had to say that they want, that they need, and that what is and which is required. Thank you so much.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. I want to thank each and every one of you. I'm so moved. I'm very touched by the amount of effort and love and kindness you have put into these documents. They're really good guiding principles for our community and moving forward. And it is true, our country was founded on an opportunity to and freedom to be. Our U.S. Constitution has grounding issues and statements that guide us. Yet it took many years for a Black person in our community to be able to vote. It took many more for women and to be able to vote, right? When we look at marriage equality and we look at the freedom to be, to love who you love, and be able to have affordable housing, opportunity to housing, opportunity to jobs, everything that government does, we are called upon to do this work. And it was an oversight of early incorporation days. Yet Tonight, we did hear, some statements we sometimes hear in the community. They might have been kind of nicely put. It could have been stated more kindly, but we in Kenmore welcome and affirm everyone. This is a safe, welcoming, affirming community. That's what we desire to be and what we are goal setted to be. Without reaching for those goals and without doing the work, we're not going to get there. I can think of examples within our own building. We have male, female bathrooms. We don't have a family bathroom. We have a new park with male, female bathrooms, but no family bathrooms. Although those issues are identified, these are government buildings. We are directed to be affirming and welcoming and to also build these spaces. We have yet to do it. We have yet to follow through. And when we look at choices, healthy choices, and practicing healthy behaviors, it starts with us. But yet, some of us have a hard time leading that way too. It's easier to back down. It's harder to push forward. And November is the month of Transgender Day of Remembrance. That's a really important thing. For lives lost due to violence. Just like the many lives lost from hate and bias over the years and the centuries, we have more to do. But we are bound to repeat the past unless we are willing to look backward and reflect upon our ills of our past and move forward in a positive goal-setting way to guide our community. And I just want to thank you again. This is racially, culturally competent work. It includes intersectionality, and it helps guide us forward. It's continual work. And so I look forward to that continuation. And I sure hope there does not come a day where it stops. And I want to thank each and every one of you for your inputs. And I'm just looking at the diversity in this room. And I couldn't be more proud of the representation in this room. Thank you, each and every one of you.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
Yeah, I'll just echo a little bit of what others are saying. It's extend a little bit. I too want to thank each of you for hanging in there and for what you're going to recommend to us that we don't know yet. I just want you to know that, your work is valued here on the dais, and that we take you seriously, and we're looking forward to integrating DEIA into our decision processes here, our staff's decision processes, and how we project who we are as a community externally, so that people really feel like we're a welcoming, inclusive community. That's what we want. We want people to experience this community as welcoming and inclusive. I don't know exactly how to get there, but that's our goal. That's our North Star. So I, again, just want to really appreciate you and looking forward to our next steps.
Deputy Mayor?
It's hard to speak after all of the comments that have been made here on the dais today. I want to start first, Shannon, thank you for your education that you provided for everyone that's been in attendance and able to hear our history. And we're living history, right? And today, there's so much inequity in our world. Women still are not equal under the Constitution of this nation. There is work to be done I am thankful for the diverse group of people that are here today, each and every one of you who took your time, committed with your hearts, spoke your truth with each other, which is not an easy thing to do, to help this city move forward, to create a space. And we're building, we are working hard. This effort, this DEIA effort, and each of your commitments to our community is so important. I'm a little speechless, honestly, but thankful for your work. And we need to be working for a community. I said, we are individuals, we're community members, we're members of the state and this nation, and there's a lot of work to be done. And this work is an example of the good that other communities can do and follow, and we need more of. And it is lasting work. So thank you.
Going last is always a little tough because everybody said what I think already, but I do want to personally thank each and every one of you. I know you put in a lot of work. I know it wasn't easy. And we thank you for all of that. We truly do. Unless there's any further questions, I would entertain Councilmember File.
A point of personal privilege, if you don't mind. I would like the opportunity to move forward and ask that I make the request that we adopt this policy. I worked hard to bring it forward. I really appreciate all the support of the council to get us here to this day and to instill this amazing fine team. But it's a special moment, and I would really appreciate the opportunity. So I move that we adopt this policy.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing no discussion, would the clerk please take the roll?
Thank you, Mayor. On the motion to adopt this policy being the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Policy, seconded by Deputy Mayor O'Kane. Councilmember File.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker. Councilmember Baker.
We can't hear you, Councilmember.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
Yes.
With 6 yeses and 0 nos, the motion passes.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item on the business agenda, resolution number 22-09, resolution number 22-390. City of Kenmore's 2023 fee schedule presented by Development Services Director Samantha Loyuk and Permit Coordinator Tila Gardner.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Kenmore City Council. Tonight we have the 2023 fee resolution, and I'll let Tila present it as her last day working at Kenmore.
Well, good evening, council. So there's no presentation tonight. I was just gonna kind of summarize what's in the agenda bill. So generally, that item number 1, the fees are proposing to be increased by the 9.5% CPI, except for those fees that are listed. There are a number of fees that are new line items, either by ordinance or other requirements. They're based on, some are based on our time spent or on similar fees. So did you have any questions?
Questions? Councilmember Marshall.
As we see the population increase and I assume that more of your time gets spent on processing and dealing with the fees. Does that then reflect some of the idea behind the increases?
So the fees at the rates that were set are based on a 2015 fee study. Since then, we've been updating them per the CPI.
Wasn't that, and again, it's been, well, 7 years now, but wasn't the 2015 direction from council, didn't we tie it to some percentage of cost recovery or something like 85% cost recovery?
Yes, so we set cost recovery at 90% for building services and 80% for planning.
Okay.
Or like land use.
Any other, yeah, Mr. City Manager.
Can you talk about, excuse me, can you talk about the heat pump permit fee?
Sure, so there is a new line item for heat pump permit. Trying to find where it is in this.
While you find it, I'll jump in. So the heat pump fee is a mechanical fixture fee that was reduced to the same amount as what a water heater, right, Tila? Okay, yeah. So we reduced that because it was really high, and we want to encourage people to use heat pumps. Know where it is?
And I can't. We also changed the gas water heater cost to match with the plumbing water heater cost, which is the same also now as the new heat pump line item.
And all new construction is going to be required to have a heat pump according to the building code changes that were just made, if I remember correctly.
So yeah, there's the fees under the mechanical permit section are for additions or alterations of houses. New houses have a per unit cost.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that I hope, I mean, this is great. We need to increase it to make sure we're recovering costs, but this does feel like the kind of thing that, you know, at some level with the cap that we'll want to revisit to even potentially further differentiate what we're trying to incentivize and de-incentivize. So I'm hoping maybe in the next, you know, over the next year, we can dig into this a little bit more. And I'm so bummed it's your last day. Oh my God.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, first, Tila, thank you for your great service to the city. We're really going to miss you. Councilmember Shrubnik's really good at stealing thunder sometimes. But I do think I appreciate that the heat pump fee permit fee has been reduced. It is in alignment with our climate action plan. And I'll echo that it's incredibly important for us to incentivize our fees to ensure environmentally sensitive climate action type permitting and building in our community. So thank you.
Councilmember File.
Oh, gosh, thank you for all your great work. I really appreciate this. I do appreciate the adjustment in that heat pump permit fee. It wasn't all that long ago when a couple local businessmen came in and contacted me and let me know that there was an exorbitant difference in Kenmore versus surrounding cities. And it's always good to look at our work and double check and see where we need to adjust to also align with our goals. I think we're getting there and we're on the right track. I want to make sure that we're also thinking about the opportunity for contractors to be able to apply for an affordable permit on behalf of their client or with them. Some of the difficulty, has been a little bit of that, I hear as well. And some people aren't just very aware of it. It would be nice to empower our contractors to continue to share what we have to offer and help support our residents who had been putting off doing some of this work. So Tila, also thank you so very much for all your work for Kenmore and for our community.
Yeah, of course. I feel on the spot about that, so I'm just going to answer the question instead. So well, I'm not sure if it was a question, but we're part of mybuildingpermit.com. So in my opinion, those permits are pretty easy to obtain. They're through, they're over the counter, which means once the contractor or homeowner goes through the process, they're emailed automatically to the contacts listed. And then as part of our hardship fee that we adopted, there is an option for basically to request a refund after those fees have been paid. Since they are over the counter, there's no basically staff intervention at the point of payment, but they can follow up with us later on that.
And just to follow that, and I really appreciate that point of perspective. I think it's important to acknowledge that there can be barriers to reaching out and asking and requesting help. And so sometimes that friendly person who's visiting in one's home and doing repairs is a great asset to both, the homeowner or the business owner. And can really help be connective. We see all of that also in human services and housing, not too surprising. But this does help build bridges where some are just afraid to walk up to the counter and ask or call. It does help build awareness and connectivity of our programs that we have to offer, and helps bring that communication further out into the community. So thank you.
Councilmember Baker.
Tila, you are really going to be missed. You have been such tremendous help to me over the years. It's going to be really difficult to see you go. I hope that you find the happiness that you found here, and certainly the staff. I know you'll never be able to replace your friendships with the staff, and they will continue whether you're here or not. But I hope you're going to meet new staff that are maybe close to what Kenmore's people are. So anyway, Tila, no more phone calls for me, no more asking inane questions about old permits. I truly appreciated you, and I am going to miss you. Good luck on anything you do. You're going to be very successful.
Yeah, and I want to apologize for keeping you late on your last day. Deputy Mayor?
And I'm sorry that I have another comment. I appreciate all the good work that went into this. I do want to say that I hope that our fees stabilize and don't have to go up in 9.5% the next time they come around. We do have contractors and professionals who pay these fees. It impacts their businesses. It impacts our bottom line. And when we have to increase fees like this every year, or as they come up, we become part of the problem of inflation as well. So I genuinely hope that we don't have to increase this much again. We are where we are, but I just had to call attention to our role in the system as well. That, sometimes we might be able to take a pause, but I know that our city does need money. We do need to fund our services, and this is why we are doing this. But this inflation is really destructive. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? The chair would entertain a motion to approve resolution number 390, City of Kenmore's 2023 fee schedule.
So moved.
Second, Councilmember Palio.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing no discussion, would the clerk please take the roll?
Thank you, Mayor. On the motion to approve resolution number 22-390, City of Kenmore's 2023 fee schedule, seconded by Councilmember File. Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember Baker,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
No.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 5 yeses and 1 no, the motion passes.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Next
you.
Up, we've got staff reports.
Yeah, 3 things. So with this good weather we've been having, Juanita Drive experienced another small but meaningful milestone this week, and that is the final section, the Juanita curve, has been striped. So we were worried that they weren't going to be able to do it until next spring because of weather, but we've had a nice weather window, so they got it done. They still have some more symbols and other markings to put down, but we got the stripes in, so that's huge, and won't have to deal with the candlesticks and cones and everything for the next 6 months there. So that's great. We also just recently closed, I think it was on Friday, even though it was Veterans Day on Friday, I think we closed on Friday on the 73rd Avenue Muck Creek property that you approved the purchase for. So we now own that property, and that's going to be a huge restoration and mitigation potential. So we'll be working on that and getting a restoration plan for that property, and more to come. And then just last but not least, I wanted to be the last one to sing Tila's praises. And today I had an exit interview with her, and she just reminded me of what a phenomenal person she is. She's been with us for 8 years, started out as a temporary employee doing some data entry for us. Yeah, and right away we saw how competent and what a team player she is. And so we found a spot for her in the organization. She started out as an administrative permit specialist, and then she just worked her way up to permit coordinator. And we have that position in the budget for senior permit coordinator, and we had her in mind for that. But then guess what? Her competency and the way she is, she got noticed. She got noticed beyond the borders of Kenmore, and she wasn't looking. They sought her out, and they didn't even need to call me and ask me for a reference or anything. They just snatched her. So, and this is a great career opportunity for Tila. She's going to be in a supervisory position, much bigger cities, much more breadth of responsibility. And I told Tila today, and I mean it, she can do whatever she wants in her career. And so I'm excited to see where she takes her career. I will be watching from wherever I am. I'll be watching to see her blossom in her career. So yeah, so let's do that. Let's stand up and give her a round of applause. Thank you, Tila. One thing I really liked about Tila is she truly embraced our service vision, which is propelling Kenmore upward. We create a thriving community where all people love where they live. And she saw how what she does on a daily basis translates into that service vision. And she helped me spread that message. In fact, she actually gets credit for coming up with half of the service vision. So back in 2018, we had these little workshops we were doing. Where the employees were trying to create the service vision, and we met in 2 groups. One group came up with propelling Kenmore upward. That's a great. But then Tila and her group came up with, we create a thriving community where all people love where they live. And so I just decided to take the 2 and stick them together. But Tila is the one who came up with the second half of our service vision, and she lives it. So thank you, Tila. We'll miss you so much. That's all I have, Your Honor.
All right, council member reports and comments. I'll start with council member Baker.
Thank you. I've had lots of problems here with internet. I'm glad that it's working tonight. There's been, I've been attending Sound Transit meetings and Harborview Hospital meetings and Board of Health. So I've been working, and right now I am floating in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on a 7-day crossing. So hopefully I'll be home on Saturday. Thank you all.
Councilmember Marshall.
Thanks again, Ms. Gardner. And I just want to share with the council that for some reason I was driving up 68th during school hours or right before school hours in the morning. And I think it was the first time I saw two small kids. They looked very small to me. They were just really small guys walking up the sidewalk before school, hurrying off to KMS. And they were way down, or what I felt was like way down closer to where we are now, but trudging up, beautiful. It was a beautiful thing to see these kids safe on the sidewalk. So thanks everybody involved for that.
Councilmember Shubnik.
And similarly, seeing Juanita Drive really taking shape. I don't have a report. I just have a little reflection on, what I heard earlier today from citizen comments is the need to balance the urgent need to address climate action and, of course, affordable housing, which we are investing in heavily, with not wanting to go out to the residents for more money. And in fact, even concerns about the increases that we're proposing within the budget councilmanically, meaning without a vote, the ones that we are empowered to raise without a vote. So I think there always is a tension between those two issues, what we need to spend money on and support to spend more, or the lack of support to spend more. So I just want to reflect that I'm hearing that, and I'm hoping that what we're doing is balancing those and doing what is right to launch the cap right away by hiring. There is no way to fully fund it immediately. We don't have authority to fund it at that level immediately. So what we're doing is funding it with the funds that we can leverage immediately to prioritize those actions that will have the greatest impact on reducing greenhouse gases. So just wanted to reflect that back.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. What an amazing night has been, between the discussion about salmon and thinking about future opportunities for Kenmore. Exciting night. I just wanted to say I had the opportunity to attend the last SCA PIC meeting, policy and issues meeting. And I hear that the city of Shoreline has started their process and are further into the process of missing middle housing. And they've done a really good job of going out into the community, working with community and developing specific maps for types of housing. Most noticeably, they've readjusted their housing ordinance code for townhouses, and they're starting with cottage housing, and they have a map that's specific to cottage housing based off of those discussions, and they brought the community with them. And I think that's pretty exciting. And they have many of the environmentally sensitive kind of areas like we do. So it's something locally to kind of keep track of and watch. Also, we've had a recent update to our legislative priorities. At the meeting, it was discussed that they were looking at workforce support. And along with that, it was recommended to also include employment and job skills and worker retraining. Those issues are highly underfunded in the federal budget to state budget now and affecting all the region. And without funding for those issues, it's a bigger price tag on community supports and less support to go around. So I'd like to recommend we just expand that line to include those other two principles. If you don't object, maybe we could do a thumbs up or have a discussion about it. I know it's a little out of order for how we normally would do things, but I did want to raise that issue. And it would be nice to be able to go back to pick and say, this is something we can support.
Could we, I mean, it's going to be coming back to council at some point soon, I think. Could you work on some language to propose that we could discuss then, Councilmember Fowl?
Happy to do that.
That'd be great.
Happy to do that. And
if you could get me some language in the next day or two, then I can show it as a revision in the legislative documents and have it ready for the agenda bill.
Easy breezy.
All right.
And, I just wanted to say, we have an amazing history in Kenmore, Indigenous history, settlers. We have history connected to slavery and bigotry and hate, and also welcoming, affirming community, which is beautiful. And I can think of a part of our community that would have been, pretty hurt by some of the statements heard tonight. And you know what? We have enough kindness in our hearts for all of our community members in our community. That's because we are a welcoming, affirming community, even some who maybe don't agree with some of these positions or work we have to do. But we all have to start somewhere. So it takes a whole lot of love and a lot of kindness to make the world a better place. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
This was a full and emotional meeting. I think I was almost brought to tears twice at least. So I'm sorry, I feel like my mic's too close. I just want to call attention to something that hit too close to home. And last Tuesday at Ingram High School, a school that our mayor went to, former council member Brent Smith went to, and council member Marshall's wife, Leanne Host, works as a counselor at, experienced gun violence. A 14-year-old child shot and killed a 17-year-old child. And knowing people involved who had to be there, who saw counselors holding and watching a child die in their arms, is not something I want to see continue in our world. And running into a friend of mine at the park and not knowing if I should ask about it, how to respond, and knowing that they were welcoming a hug and care meant a lot to me. That awkward moment of, should I just be nice? It's a beautiful day and your dog's so great, or acknowledge the elephant in the room. So I'm thankful I got to see Councilmember Marshall and Leanne at the park a couple of days ago. One thing that comes up, actually, I'll just say this. Today, the students of Ingram High School went to, the Seattle Seattle City Hall and organized, and there was a sign, maybe probably a few signs, but the thing that people are tired of hearing is thoughts and prayers and that, you know, wishing it away and all of this. And what I know is as a city, there's not a lot that we can do to mitigate gun violence, but there are actions that we can take. And I would like to present for consideration at a future meeting that the city of Kenmore institute a gun buyback program similar to what's successfully been implemented in the city of Kirkland. They've hosted 2, I think possibly 3 events. They have one coming up this week or just recently had one. It's a step in the right direction. I think it's something too that we might consider reaching out to our neighboring cities, Lake Forest Park and Bothell, to see if they might want to participate in to increase the opportunity for community members to donate or sell back their guns. You know, they're $25 to $250 gift cards. It's not a lot of money, but it's an opportunity for people who don't want guns in their possession to get rid of them. And the vast majority of gun deaths are suicide, 60%. And then there are random acts of violence that are impulsive, immature acts like what happened at Ingram High School. Providing opportunity for people to reduce or get rid of their guns through our city is something that I would be very proud if we could do. And I know that this doesn't step on anyone's Second Amendment right, but it does open the door for people to reduce the number of guns in our community. Everything that we can do to reduce gun violence is a step in the right direction, and it's an action. So I'm asking our council if we can bring this back in January to discuss and find a way to implement something along these lines.
Is that a formal ask?
That's a formal ask.
Yeah, I'd second that. Thank you. Councilmember Fowl.
I really appreciate that. I think it's you know, a step in the right direction. It's a way for community to get guns out of their home if they don't any longer need them or have reason not to have them anymore, and yet alone dispose of them safely. We might also want to expand our free gun lock program that we started this last year for safe gun locks and storage at home. You know, any measure we can take, preventative measures, save many lives. And just lastly, I just, you know, Councilmember Marshall, your wife is an amazing hero. You know, she protected students. She made sure they were safe. She stayed on campus and helped check families out all throughout the end of the day. Now that's a hero. Just an amazing woman. And it's a sad thing to have gun violence in our schools, and it's a sad thing to experience, but hopefully we can have less of that. And just mazel tov.
And I had something that wasn't that I was going to.
Okay, well, I think we have general consensus on your topic for January. So unless there's objection, not seeing any. So
thank you, Council. And I did want to thank Councilmember Shrebnick for talking about the nuance on climate action plan and severe lack of funding for the work that we want to do. You know, I would, full implementation of the cap is something I would love to do. And I know each of us would. We don't have the funds right now. Maybe we'll get creative at, I don't know when we can touch it, but it's a priority. What is good news is we had Jeff Jensen here today talking about other side ways where we can be doing work to improve the environment and get funding to do that work that complements the climate action plan. And there are ways that we will get the work done. We are committed to the environment. We're committed to climate action. So yeah, I heard someone mention, someone I admire mentioned looking for money isn't going to get the job done. We've got to get the money to get the job done. It's just, and we're going to do it. But we are a committed city to the environment, and we're taking action. Anyway, thank you.
All right. Deputy Mayor stole much of my thunder, I think. Yeah, when I walked the halls of Ingram from 92 to 97, I think the worst thing that ever happened there was probably some fistfights or, scuffles between kids and some toilet papering and things like that. My heart was broken on Tuesday when I saw the news. And frankly, it's just one more sacrifice that we're making to the altar of the Second Amendment. And it's shameful, and it's a stain, frankly, on us as a country that we value the Second Amendment above the lives of 40,000 people every single year. And we just seem to accept that. And we don't do anything. And it's just not acceptable. The other thing I just want to mention, heard earlier this evening that Jim Donovan, owner of Kenmore Camera, passed away. So on behalf of the city, I think I can say that our thoughts are with him and his family at this time. I will be going to National League of Cities with Councilmember File. So it should be an interesting trip to Kansas City, meet with other council members, we learn from each other those trips. They're very useful to talk to folks from other parts of the country and see what's going on and compare notes and find new strategies. So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, with that, nothing more to come before us. City Council of Kenmore stands adjourned.